Commission for Wednesday, May 27, 2027. Just for the public that may be listening, the Planning Commission will conduct this meeting electronically using the Zoom video conference platform. Members of the public may listen, view, and/or participate in this meeting using Zoom. The instructions are below, it says here, but they were in the agenda that was online. But if you want to telephone in, that number is 669-900-6833. The webinar ID is 839-4780-9040. And I will give some further instructions in just a little bit about how to give testimony. But first, we'll start with a roll call.
Commissioner Carlton. Oh, Commissioner Carlton.
He's not muted, is he?
No.
Oh, I bet he went to do his other computer.
I know he's present, so I'll say he's present. Commissioner Lasowski.
Yes, here.
Commissioner McLean-Wenzel.
Here.
Commissioner Logan.
Here.
Commissioner Mobley.
Here.
Commissioner Mayton.
Here.
And Chairman Crosby.
Present. Okay, we had the minutes for the April 27, 2020 meeting, our last meeting, that were in our packet. Was anything noted that needed to be changed, corrected, updated, or otherwise?
I noticed on page 4 of the minutes, it said Commissioner McLean-Wenzel stated that most building facades are not that big of a concern. That doesn't sound like anything I would say. So I'm wondering if we could strike that, or if there was something more to that that needed to be added.
I don't. I
And
mean,
maybe it was out of context.
yeah, the written minutes aren't meant to be verbatim, so we might have just missed some of the content in the comment. So we can just strike it if that's what you'd prefer.
That would be great.
Where's that at though? I'm not seeing it on page 4.
I think it's page 4.
It's about halfway down.
Yeah.
Is this in regards to the Sandy Vault modification?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, what I might suggest, just because we want to make sure that if there is more context to that comment, you know, I don't doubt that Commissioner McLean-Wenzel is thinking that doesn't sound like something I would say, but it may be a better approach if we go back. I know we're not going to do that tonight unless there's a burning need to adopt the minutes tonight, to just go back and listen to that section. And if it's incorrect, then obviously striking it would be appropriate. If there's more context that needs to be added, I think that would be a better approach, because, you know, ultimately the minutes are just meant to capture what the discussion was. And my inkling is probably that if there was more context, it would maybe make more sense, or we could confirm that indeed it wasn't either Commissioner McLean-Wenzel that said it or that she said it that way.
So
Well, I don't want to make it work for the staff. If that's something that I could do, I could go back and listen to it.
So David, are you saying we'd come back with the minutes at the next meeting?
Yeah, I mean, as opposed to just, because, you know, the idea is just to make sure that we're capturing what was said. So I wouldn't want to strike something that was said just because maybe the context around it isn't complete. Or I'd like to confirm that, in fact, that really wasn't said before we strike it. It's my concern is just more accuracy rather than,
Yeah.
someone could say that we're trying to sort of paint the picture differently than what it, how it really was that evening. And that's the thing I want to avoid.
But is this the sentence that says Commissioner McLean-Wenzel stated that most building facades are not that big of a concern, but the north side of building 1 should be articulated and designed more robust?
Yes, but the way you just read it sounded different.
That's the way I
It's fine. Leave it the way it is.
Yeah, I have that sentence in the minutes I'm looking at with a comma and then additional information kind of explaining what you meant by that statement.
Okay, Kelly, that's fine. We should move on. It's not that important.
Okay. Any other comments on the minutes? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for the April 27, 2020 Planning Commission meeting.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of 27 April 2020 as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Do we need roll call votes, David?
No, a voice vote is fine.
Okay. All right, so we've had the in favors. Any opposed? Nothing heard. Minutes are approved. And now we give opportunity for any citizen communication on any item that is not on tonight's agenda. And let me give those instructions. If you want to say something and you're on Zoom, you click the raise hand button and wait to be recognized by Kelly. If you are participating via telephone, you dial *9 to raise your hand. And if you have some written testimony, you need to email it to planning@ci.sandy.or.us as soon as possible. So any general comments from the public that on something that's not on tonight's agenda?
Yeah, I do have a hand raised from Kathleen Walker, so I'm going to unmute her and allow her to talk.
Okay, thank you. And Kathleen, you know the routine, your name and address. You have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Hey, I just wanted to check in and figure out what Hollis's email is, because I think I sent you all a bunch of a couple of input letters and it bounced back from Hollis. So I just want to make sure I have her email accurate.
Well, did you use the city addresses?
I used what was on the city website.
It should have worked.
I mean, we can have our IT people look into it. I don't have an answer for you at this time. That's the best I could offer is we can have IT look into it.
Okay, it says, go ahead.
I was going to say, Kathleen, you can get my personal email from somebody there, but I don't want to give it out publicly.
Sure, I may already have that. I don't know. I'll look. Okay, well, I think what I sent it to was HMACLEAN-WENZEL@cityofsandy.com. Is that right?
That should work. That should work.
Isn't it ci.sandy.or.us, something like that? It's a little bit different.
It can be either, actually.
Either way, right?
Yeah, they forward to the same email.
Either one works.
Okay, well, like I said, I got bounce backs on both things I sent, so I will try sending it a different way, but if you could check into that, I'd sure appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Kathleen, can you give your address again?
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, 15920 Southeast Bluff Road, Sandy, Oregon.
Thank you.
Thank
Hi.
you.
Kathleen, this is
Yep.
Greg from IT here, actually. If you would like to, if you have my email address on file, hopefully, if you want to shoot me a quick email, I can certainly forward over the actual address that we have on it.
Okay, I appreciate that. I forwarded it to Jeff as the city recorder, but I will forward it to you too. Thanks, Greg.
Okay, thank you.
Do you see any other hands raised, Kelly?
No,
Okay,
that was the only one raised.
we will move on to new business. We have 2 public hearings tonight, both of which are ones that we forward a recommendation or changes or whatever to city council. I've got so many papers here and screens I'm trying to keep straight. So we will open at 7:14. This is public hearing for file 20-001, the Gunderson Road and Park Annexation. And again, I've got extra comments here to read because of the Zoom. Is this the, let me go back to David, ask David, is this the legislative one? That what I'm wondering is, do we ask for opponent and proponent or just public comment?
It's quasi judicial ultimately, so it would
Okay.
be the quasi judicial one.
Okay. All right, public testimony for this hearing will be called for in 3 groups: testimony in favor of the proposal, testimony opposed to the proposal, and then neutral testimony. Again, as I said before, if you are participating online on Zoom, click the raise hand button at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized. If you are participating via telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized then. There will be time limits, 3 minutes for any public testimony, and we will move on. Okay. Any abstentions? Anybody on the Planning Commission wishing to abstain from the hearing?
I need to abstain. So my company, Lancaster Mobley, has done work associated with the application. So I'm going to abstain and stick around though for the next agenda item.
Okay.
And Todd, I would suggest in a virtual setting anyway, maybe turning off your video so it's as if you're
Off of the dais. Sure, you bet.
Thank you.
Okay, any conflict of interest? Anybody on the Planning Commission?
Before Todd goes, is somebody going to text him or email him when the other item is back on?
Well, if he just turned off his video, he would be listening, wouldn't he?
Yeah, I'm still here. I mean, I can hear it. I'll leave it turned on so I can hear what's going on. So I'll jump back in after it's over.
Okay.
Okay, I didn't see anything on conflict of interest. Any ex parte contact?
Chair.
Claire.
Chairman, I received 2 emails this month from Kathleen Walker today, and I received a 3rd email from someone named Scott, and I'm going to butcher the last name, but it's Ruehrdanz, back on May 7th, both concerning this application.
Okay,
I think we all received Kathleen Walker email, so I think everybody would just declare that.
well, that one too is also in the record.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was more than just me on the May 7th email. I just don't know if it was on the record or not. I can forward it.
why don't we just go ahead this is a recommendation to council as it is, so you're not making a final decision regardless, but I think that should just be included in the record as well. That May 7 email.
Including the email, okay.
The May 7 email was from Bull Run Terrace, I thought, was on with relation to that.
I think that's correct.
That's
Oh,
what I had too.
I just pulled it up. You're right. I apologize.
Okay.
I was gonna say, we didn't receive that one.
Yeah, it's a letter for Bull Run. My apologies. Just the two for today. Everybody else got.
And just to clarify, those two that you got today, maybe this is as much a question for staff as it is anybody else, are in the record, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. So those are no longer ex parte if they're now in the record.
Okay.
And
All right.
Jerry, would you like to just go over again for the public that we would prefer them not to include Planning Commission when they send in their written comments, that if they send them to staff, staff will always put them into the record and forward them to you appropriately?
Yes, that's a good point. For one thing, I know none of us like receiving emails as we're leaving the house to go to a meeting. So those any public emails that are wanting to be, or written even, that are intended to be in the record need to be sent to staff, not to individual planning commissioners. I know I have a tendency myself not to read them, just to prohibit the ex parte contact until I see it in the record. Okay, any questions before we move on with the normal content? Okay, if you testify, you must raise all issues you wish to address at this hearing. Although that is, I need to amend that because we're doing this to make a recommendation or changes or whatnot to City Council. There will be another public hearing on this very item before City Council. So you will have opportunity, the public will have opportunity to give testimony there as well. And any comments that are entered into the record tonight go with our recommendation or our decision to Planning Commission or to the City Council. Your comment should state why the application should or should not be approved, or include your proposed modifications you believe are necessary for approval according to the standards. Because this is the initial evidentiary hearing, state law grants any party the right to request a continuance of this hearing or ask the record remain open after the hearing is closed. If you do not raise specific issues at the final evidentiary hearing or by close of the record, or fail to provide statements or evidence to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal the decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that particular issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. We'll call for the staff report.
Okay, I just want to, before I go into it, I want to verify that Emily's taking minutes for this item.
Yep, I'm on it.
Thank you. Just want to make sure because I'm not going to be taking.
Kelly, one quick thing too, and I might very well have missed it, Chair Crosby, but I believe you mentioned time limits for the public. Did you also get time limits for the applicant as well?
Yes, there's 15-minute time limit for the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
And I believe a 5-minute rebuttal.
Yes.
Okay, let me, I'm going to do a screen share here. Okay, I'm assuming everybody can see my screen. Okay, so the subject before you tonight in this quasi-judicial hearing is Gunderson Road and Parkland annexation. This is the property just to the south of the Bailey Meadows subdivision property. And I'll just jump into it. I don't have a very long slideshow. So you've already seen multiple slideshows for Bailey Meadows. You've also seen a slideshow for the UGB expansion, which relates directly to this property area. So I'm going to try to go through this pretty quickly. So as you'll see, the area is located to the south of Ponder Lane, Nichols Glen, and the future location of Bailey Meadows, and is along Highway 211. Just to bring you up to speed on the UGB expansion, the planning commission, you guys and gals, recommended approval of the UGB expansion all the way back now in February, early February. It then went to city council. They approved it by ordinance. It then a week later went to the Clackamas County Planning Commission on March 9th, and they recommended approval. And then the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners was originally supposed to be in March. That got pushed all the way back to May because of COVID concerns. And then it got pushed back once more to June until the Bailey Meadows subdivision decision was decided, which we just sent out the order on that yesterday. So the annexation proposal, consistent with the UGB expansion, is 6.42 acres. It's for needed parkland, a minor arterial road, which is known as Gunderson Road, and for a portion of Highway 211 and the facilities such as stormwater and easements that are associated with Highway 211. At this time, the applicant is not seeking any land for additional residential, commercial, or industrial development. And just to reiterate, it's only allowing for a parkland and roads, nothing to do with any additional housing. As you probably saw entered into the record, there was some concern from the Fair Housing Council of Oregon regarding adding additional residential land into the UGB. However, the additional land, even though some of it will be zoned residential, will not have any housing. So after I explained that to the Fair Housing Council, they were satisfied. The comp plan and zoning modifications that are part of this annexation application, the existing county comp plan is agricultural. The existing county zoning is exclusive farm use, which is known as EFU in Oregon. If the annexation is approved and comes into city limits, a majority of the area will be comprehensive plan designated low density residential, with the park area being parks and open space. The zoning designation for the parks, which is 2.38 acres, will be parks and open space. And the zoning designation for the rest of the area, which is 4.04 acres, will be single family residential, which is our lowest residential density, although the density is not being evaluated again because there's no housing being proposed in this area. And then here, this map probably looks pretty familiar. You saw it with the UGB expansion. So 1, which is circled in green, that's the parkland. 2 is a slope easement for construction. 3 is the public right-of-way dedication area for Gunderson Road. 4 is a public utility easement. 5 is a stormwater tract, and that will catch all the stormwater from the highway improvements. 6 is another slope easement and construction easement, and 7 is the actual highway of 211. And that pretty much concludes my slideshow, so I'm going to stop sharing at this time. And that pretty much concludes the summary of the staff report at this time. I'm sure there'll be more conversation if there's public input. And if you have any questions regarding the different letters, we can discuss those now. The letter that was received from Fair Housing Council or Ms. Walker, or we could wait until after public comment has occurred. It's really up to you guys if you have questions now or you want to wait to get answers on some of that.
I do have a couple of questions, but I can wait till everybody else goes.
Okay.
I might, Jerry, maybe one question. Kelly, just, I mean, you don't need to do it now, but, you know, one of the questions in particular, some of the comments from Kathleen Walker had to do with the houses facing the park. And I'm looking at the plat that, you know, I actually grabbed it off of the prior, you know, you know, when we were doing Bailey Meadows. But if you could have that, just the plat available to bring up when we, it'll, you know, a little bit later date, so we can kind of get a reference frame for those houses, Ponder Lane, and that, and where the park is. I want to talk about it a little bit, but I think the pictures can be worth 1,000 words and help generate some answers, I hope.
Yeah, I'll let David speak more to this, but I'm a little reluctant to do that because the annexation before you tonight actually has nothing really to do with the criteria in 1786. And a lot of that stuff was already decided with the Bailey Meadows decision. So I don't know how much of a deep dive we really want to be taking into that, since that those considerations around Parkland and houses on the Parkland and Parkland improvements were part of the decision that was already rendered. Do you want to add to that, David?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up with that. I think, as Kelly put it, the decision about the Parkland was all part of the subdivision approval, ultimately the approval. And those criteria really aren't applicable, how the houses face, to this decision tonight. You know, obviously, the Parkland is included in the UGB expansion and also included in the annexation request and the zone change. But those criteria were addressed before you when you considered the subdivision, and ultimately before the city council as well. So, you know, I'm not going to say that you cannot put a picture of the plat in, that's unlawful. But I don't think it's relevant ultimately to the decision you're going to make tonight. So it may just ultimately confuse your discussion more than it helps.
Well, and David, thank you. I guess you kind of hit to the nail I was kind of going towards was, you know, the public input had to do with, you know, what, you know, streets and, you know, and parking lot and grading and all kinds of stuff in terms of what that thing looks like, etc. And that has to obviously with the application for the subdivision, and that as far as we're concerned, that's all not to be an issue with respect to the annexation or not. That would be something to talk about when it comes to the actual application. Is that, if that's what you're telling me, then I understand that we have the input, but it applies to the application for the subdivision, not the application for the annexation.
Yeah, that's my opinion. Correct.
Okay, thanks, David.
And thanks for that clarification. Everybody get what he's saying?
That answered my question too, so I didn't even have to ask it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great minds think together, Chris.
But on that note, I think maybe going forward is going through and have the cities do their presentation, and then I believe it's going to be Mr. Robinson do his. We start getting these discussions, and I kind of want to hear the city versus the applicant. Okay, both those two, and it just seems like we're jumping down the road a little further than we need to be right now. That's just my viewpoint.
Yeah, I guess the only, Mr. Commissioner Carlton asked the question. I just wanted to get out in front of it that I don't think, David and I already spoke about this since we got Ms. Walker's comments. And I don't think we want to go down the road of leading the public that's listening in, though, and the commission down the road of thinking ultimately that 1786 applies and that you can start making conditions tied to annexation with it. I'd rather just kind of up at the front of the meeting kind of detail that that's not going to be the case with this annexation request.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good clarification. Appreciate that. Kelly, is the applicant in the room? I can't tell.
Mike Robinson has his hand up, so I'm assuming once you go to the applicant presentation, he'll probably speak to that, or whoever's on his phone here. Just says Mike Robinson.
Did you have more for staff report?
I really didn't. I mean, you guys, like I said, you've already seen the subdivision, I think at 3 or 4 different meetings, and the UGB request. I wanted to keep it kind of simple, and then once there's public input and you guys have more questions of myself, or probably more importantly, David, because the annexations are so kind of legal in a lot of senses that we would just be able to answer those in the staff recap or in the discussion after close of the hearing.
Okay. Well, then we can move to the applicant's presentations, 15 minutes. You can flip the switch there, Kelly.
Yes, I did.
Good evening, Chair Crosby, members of the Sandy Planning Commission. My name is Michael Robinson. My last name is spelled R-O-B-I-N-S-O-N. My mailing address is 1211 Southwest 5th Avenue, Suite 1900, Portland, Oregon, 97204. Chair Crosby, I'm not going to do the main part of the presentation tonight. Mr. Chris Goodell with AKS is going to do that. But before we go further, I just wanted to alert the Planning Commission and Mr. O'Neill to the fact that we haven't received any letters other than Ms. Walker's letter. So if there's additional testimony that's been received, we're wondering if you could send that to us and then we could try and address it in rebuttal.
Okay.
And are you, I apologize, are you hearing me okay?
Yes, we're hearing you fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, we hear you. We don't see you, but we hear you.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, it's probably just as well you don't see me, but I'm going to try and I'm going to try and remedy that here in a moment if I can.
Yeah, I think the letter from the Fair Housing Council of Oregon was uploaded to the agenda item.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't.
I believe it was. Let me look.
My apology, Kelly. I didn't.
I think unless I'm wrong, I think the letter from the Fair Housing Council applied to our other agenda item on the code change.
Yes, you're correct. So the Fair Housing Council did reach out to me. Sorry for the confusion here. Been a long day. The Fair Housing Council did reach out to me on this particular item, but they did not submit written comment. They just had a lot of questions and we went back and forth, but they did not submit testimony. Sorry about that.
So Chair Crosby, I don't have anything else to say at this time. I'll probably testify during rebuttal, but I'd like Mr. Goodell to talk now on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Does he need to be turned on, Kelly?
Yeah, hold on. Sorry. Trying to do multiple things here at once. I think.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. Good evening, Chair Crosby, members of the Planning Commission. Thank you for your time here tonight. My name is Chris Goodell. I'm with AKS, and our firm prepared the annexation application and zone change comprehensive plan map amendment that you're hearing here this evening. My address is 12965 Southwest Herman Road, Suite 100, Tualatin, Oregon, 97062. We don't have a big presentation here this evening. This is, I think, the third time you've seen applications from us here on this, whether it's a UGB expansion, a subdivision, and now this one. So I think you're all pretty familiar with the area and with the issues. Kelly's staff report and our application summarized it well. We want to thank Kelly and the other city staff for the positive recommendation and help throughout this application process. It's been a long ride. We've reviewed the staff report and agree with the findings and conclusions in it. We did receive the letter from Kathleen Walker and appreciate her comments regarding Chapter 17.86 of the city's development code as it relates to parkland for subdivisions. And based on the testimony we heard here this evening, we agree with city staff and the city attorney with respect to their opinions, that chapter is not relevant to the applications that are before you here this evening. It's relevant to the subdivision application, which has already been heard by you and went to the city council. And as Kelly mentioned earlier, the final decision's been made. So we wanted to thank you for your time here and your consideration of the applications here this evening. We would appreciate if you'd follow your staff's guidance and forward a recommendation of approval onto the city council. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have regarding the application and respond to any testimony that is received after this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I do have another hand up with, oh, wait, never mind. They just didn't lower their hand.
Okay, we're going to move to public testimony, and I've already shared how that is done. I will tell you again, just as a reminder, we will have public testimony in 3 groups: those in favor of the proposal, those opposed to it, and if you're just neutral on it. If you are participating online on Zoom, click the raise hand button, which I believe is at the bottom of the screen, and at the appropriate time, and then wait to be recognized by Kelly. If you're on the telephone, you dialed *9 to raise your hand and be recognized. So we'll move to testimony in favor of the proposal. Remember to state your name and your mailing address at the beginning for the record. And each testimony has 3-minute time limit. So I'm calling for any testimony in favor of the proposal.
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay. We'll move on to any testimony in opposition or not in favor of the proposal.
There's one hand raised. I will unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you have the floor. State your name and your address.
Kathleen Walker, 15920 Southeast Bluff Road. Regarding the proposed off-site parkland dedication that you're looking at tonight, it is, you are planning to basically annex this in and make it parkland under the existing parkland stuff. You all kind of ignored it when we brought it up before about how this doesn't meet the existing code. The final staff report really didn't ever address it. At the very last meeting after public input was closed, there was a mention that turning the houses around to face the park, that Kathleen was right about that and that would be done. So I appreciate that you determined all that was doesn't apply here, but I'm here to, because I have some outstanding questions that haven't been answered, and I'm here to explain to the residents of Sandy, as none of you have, what kind of park we're gonna end up with. And if I have any of this wrong, please help me out and explain it to me, because I don't want to be wrong about this. You have made a decision to allow the developer to use this property as part of their dedicated parkland instead of a fee in lieu of. Your planning commission and the city council appeal did not address any of the code requirements other than the fact about which way the houses point. So as reference to that, as it stands now, this park will have no vehicle access. This park will have no sidewalks for pedestrian access. This park will not be graded or seeded. And this will be an empty piece of land that the developer is giving us to meet his parkland instead of the fee in lieu of, which we were actually owed $332,000. So having no vehicle access, no sidewalk access, not graded, not seeded, that's unlike any park we have in Sandy. We have no parks like that. And when they're actually dedicating parkland under 17.86, those are the requirements, and none of those have been met. The fact that the houses are supposed to face the park, there's supposed to be a road in front of those houses. Again, as to 17.86, none of those are happening. So I guess you all can can, you know, dismiss any of that. We brought it up before, we're bringing it up again. I think it's just important the residents know this isn't a park. This is just a vacant plot of land that they're getting off their tax rolls so that they don't have to meet our code. And you all have basically blessed that for them. So if I have any of that wrong, if there is going to be sidewalks or vehicle access or a road in front of the houses, or the houses are going to be turned to meet the park, or any of those other requirements as part of the code, because no variances were issued, please let me know, because I want to make sure I understand before a LUBA appeal comes up. Thank you. Sorry to get you the letter so late, but that's the way it goes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other hands raised, Kelly?
Let's just give it a minute here. There's nothing yet, but
okay.
I just want to make sure there's nobody else. Nope, no other hands.
All right, then we'll give opportunity for neutral testimony if you're neither opposed or in favor, and they have just some general comments about the proposal. Check your raised hand with your phone or your mouse.
I don't see anything.
Okay. Then we can move on to staff recap recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm a little reluctant to go into much of 1786 because that was discussed with Bailey Meadows. That decision's already been made. You know, whether people are happy or excited or not happy or not excited, that's neither here nor there when it really comes to 1786. That was a separate land use decision. I believe Ms. Walker made every attempt to state the facts or those opinions that she just stated just a few minutes ago. And the houses are going to face the parkland, but other than that, I don't know if I have answers on all those. Sidewalks typically would be paid by the city of Sandy through SDCs. There was a case with Bornstead Park maybe 5 to 8 years ago. David probably remembers it a lot better than I do. But basically, I'll just be very honest, the city was trying to have the developer for all of the street frontage improvements along the south edge of Bornstead Park. And I believe that action even may have went to court, or it was a settlement. And it was decided that when street right of way is developed adjacent or abutting a park, that the city has to pay their fair share of street right of way improvements and sidewalks. So it would be atypical for a developer to put in sidewalks all the way around a park. Those are paid for through SDCs. The grading and the vehicle access, I don't know without having the plat in front of me, but like I said before, those concerns are not germane to the annexation request before you tonight. I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, David, or if I got any facts wrong there.
No, I mean, I think that as we said in the beginning and saying it again here, that the issue with respect to the parkland, its dedication, was a matter that was germane to the subdivision decision. So.
I guess that concludes staff's recap.
Okay. Applicant have any rebuttal?
Oh, sorry. They do. Here we go. I forget that I'm actually the one unmuting people. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Chair Crosby, members of the Planning Commission, this is Mike Robinson again on behalf of the applicant, and I'd invite Mr. Goodell to testify after I do if he has any additional testimony. So first of all, we appreciate the staff recommendation for approval. We agree, as Chris said, with the staff report, the findings, and the conditions of approval. Secondly, as both your city attorney and your planning director said, Sandy Development Code 17.86 and the subsequent sections are not relevant to an annexation, CPA, or zone change amendment. I'll just read you, if I could, very quickly, the first part of 1786-10, which is entitled Parkland Dedication. And it says, new residential subdivisions, planned developments, multifamily, or manufactured home park developments. So clearly, as was the case with the tentative subdivision, which has already been finally decided, when you have some kind of a residential development for the Planning Commission, it's indeed appropriate to talk about 1786. But that's not the case here. And as both Mr. Doofman and Mr. O'Neill said, that issue's already been addressed in the prior application. So I think we could certainly respond to the testimony, but I don't, frankly, unless the Planning Commission would like to hear more from us, I agree that talking about a code standard that's not relevant to the application before the Planning Commission isn't very fruitful. So I'm going to decline in doing that and just again say we agree with the staff recommendation and the comments about the testimony and concerning 1786. So we appreciate your time. We hope that you'll follow the staff recommendation and recommend approval of the applications to the Sandy City Council. And if Chris wants to say something, I'll stop talking now. Thank you, Mr. Crosby.
Thank you. You there, Chris?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was having an issue with the phone here. No, I have nothing to add. I think that everything's been discussed, and I echo Mr. Robinson's statement, and that's very similar to what I said at the very beginning. So thank you very much again for your time this evening.
Hey, thank you. All right. We've had all of our testimony. We've had the applicants and staff. It's our time to talk. This one is, I'm reminded of the expression of the cart before the horse. It's kind of backwards from where we normally get annexations, where they come in and we don't have a clue what's going to happen with them. They're just trying to get into the city. And in this particular one, we know a little bit more. So it does complicate it, but I'm also reminded of seeing things on movies in court cases where the judge says, pretend you didn't hear that. I feel like that's where I'm at, that some of those other things that don't apply. So we're looking at it just a simple annexation. People want to bring their property into the city. So comments, discussion, thoughts.
This is Don. Since I brought the thing up initially, a couple thoughts. One of the concerns that I've had all the way through this, and I think one thing about the Bailey Meadows is it's been a really good opportunity for citizen involvement and dialogue. And through that, we get statements, and some of them we know are correct or not correct or whatever, but they just kind of go on. And so, I did write my own testimony for the record on Bailey Meadows. Some of you know that. My main objective was I just wanted the facts to be clear and definitions to be clear and et cetera. People can have their opinions, but there's fact creep and number creep. On the reason I brought it up is, you may recall, at the original Bailey Meadows subdivision, I brought up the issue of the houses. I'm the guy that brought it up, facing the park, and Kelly's interpretation at that time was, well, there's some problems with that diagram, and the cat code needs some work. Well, okay. So anyway, the point is that it's been decided that they will. If you look at if you do just look at the plat, you'll see there's no problems with those houses facing, with no new roads need to be built, no nothing. That's really just pretty easy, I think, for the developer to do. And I can't tell from looking, because I don't have the measurements, but if the map is correct in Appendix Exhibit F that Kelly gave us, it looks to me like that dedication goes far enough to the west that it would have part of a street. I'm not sure what the name of the street is, that it would be there. In other words, we say no street access. Well, there's no street access all the way along the north boundary of that park area, or whatever. But it does appear that there is some there. So, I mean, the other concerns that Ms. Walker had, or I understand about dealing with those, but I just think that if you look at the opportunity for vehicle access, it seems to me like it's kind of there, just has to be kind of put in, and the houses can easily be addressed. So I know that didn't have anything to do with our decision, but one of my concerns has been, Jerry particularly, is I think we need to take the forum for the Planning Commission as an opportunity to help inform the public, and if we hear something that may or may not be exactly, make the statement, just don't let it slide, so that information that's not fully complete just continues to circulate, and then we get frustrated. There was, by the way, that same discussion went on at the city council meeting last time when it came to the development agreement, etc. So anyway, that's why I wanted to just take a second and make a statement. Though it doesn't apply to our decision, it does apply to some statements that were given to us in May.
Mm-hmm. I understand.
I'd like to make a statement again. It doesn't, just like Don said, doesn't really, well, maybe they influence the decision, but I just hope the public realizes that I kind of view this as a salvage effort. Things were put into motion with different procedural law things that the city's bound by, decisions made, pressure to move things along legally. And I feel that we're sitting here with some lemons and trying to work to make the best lemonade we can out of it. Is it ideal, or things could be different in terms of the park, etc.? Absolutely. Yeah. But this is what we're given. And is it ideal? No. But again, we're working within the legal confines to try to do what's right and make the best of the situation. So that's how I view it, at least, is it's really how do we salvage this thing to make the best that we can out of where we're at. So.
Okay.
And I agree, Ron. And I'm in favor of the annexation. To me, it's just one of the pieces that we've all known that have been there. I know it's not in the order that some people would like to have seen them or whatever. That's not all unusual. If you spent a few years on the Planning Commission, you've seen some things that have not come through in the exact way, but it's just the next thing, and hopefully the county commissioners will approve it, and then they can simply go the next step. The city and the developer can work on it.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Comments, questions, thoughts?
Really hard to argue with anything that's been said, and staff did a really good job at analyzing the code compliance in the staff report.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, I'll just ditto the word said. I'd like to say that I take the value of the residents' voice very seriously. I listen to the comments, I read the letters, I pay attention to social media. I get out in the public and try to meet people and just get perspectives. But on the other side of that, I also find myself very bound and determined to follow the code. And my job as a planning commissioner is to make sure that the code is applicable. Like I said earlier, my question related to 1786 was whether it had any pertinence to our decision for annexation. That's already been asked and answered. So all my questions are answered, but I do support the annexation as well.
Okay.
I do as well.
All right. I think we're at a point, we need to close the public hearing before we forget.
I'll make a motion
Move
to
to
close
the public hearing.
Okay, who moved?
No, I took a shot at it. This is Don.
Okay,
Somebody
Don
else can do
moved.
it if they want.
John, we'll call John seconded.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yes.
All right, all, been moved and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we're closed at 7:57.
Can I make a quick comment,
Sure.
Jerry? I see Ms. Walker's using the Zoom webinar chat to make comments. Those will have to be public record now, and those are not intended to be open dialogue for the public to make chats back and forth. It's more there for, like, if you can't log on, I can assist you with that, but they're not, it's not meant to be an open forum to criticize staff, the commission, or council. So I would ask that she stop replying in that chat box. I don't know how to disable it, so, but that's not the intention of that. It's not this isn't a Facebook chat to have people commenting and making negative reviews on us, so.
Good point. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I didn't even see anything, if that matters.
Yeah, I didn't either.
I did.
Okay, so it is seen. All right, well, we've closed the public hearing. I think we've had enough discussion. We can move ahead. The decision is to recommend or not recommend the annexation of this thing to, and forward it to City Council. So if somebody wants to make that motion.
Sure, I'll give it a stab. Chair, I recommend that we recommend passing 20-01 ANN/CPA ZC Gunderson Road and Parkland staff for approval to City Council.
Okay.
I second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to forward the application to City Council with our approval based on staff report and our discussion. Okay, roll call vote.
Just to clarify, I'm looking at the recommendation. Kelly, are you going to make the motion to include what you have in the recommendation, the county commission, approval, et cetera? There's some conditions that you have listed that were not mentioned in the motion.
David, can you address that?
Yeah, so the default is that unless the commission were to say we're not going to follow, this particular part of staff's recommendation, that those are by definition included in that recommendation. So if you have an issue with those, the conditions being basically that the county ultimately approve the UGB on the 3rd, and that no development, commercial, residential development is ultimately allowed, then you'd want to talk about that. But we assume that those are part of your recommendation to council.
I just thought they were part of this full staff report, so they would be included because they're in the public record.
That's true.
Such is the case.
Okay, do you want roll call now?
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Carlton?
Yes.
Commissioner Lasowski?
Yes.
Commissioner McLean-Wenzel?
Yes.
Commissioner Logan?
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley? Oh, sorry, he recused himself. Commissioner Mayton?
Yes.
And Chairman Crosby?
Yes. Motion carries then. Are we okay to move on, or does anybody want a break?
Could we take maybe just 5 minutes to just refill the coffee cup?
Sure.
Agree.
Is that okay?
Don't get too much coffee. I don't want to get going on there.
Okay.
Okay, we will take a 5-minute recess.
Okay, thank you. Chris, I like your background.
Thank you. I didn't take the picture, but I have the picture, so.
It's beautiful.
I have
I'm
a,
looking and wishing I was there.
I have a really good close-up of the peak there with just snow covering too as a close-up picture of it. So, but I like to think of summertime right now. So.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks better than my office. So.
I was going to say I need to learn how to do that. Although tonight I couldn't even get my face on there. So.
You know, I need to kind of do the same. You know, there's, depending on how you log on, if you're on an iPad or if you're on a computer or something, the interface is a little different. Or if you use their app or their browser, and you know, I look at it and it, you know, it won't let me do it because this is I don't have a green screen, and I go to their help session. This is how do you download a green screen, and I just kind of wander around without any luck. So I'll get Todd. Todd will have to show me, or Chris will have to show me how it works.
Yeah, usually since we're on break, I guess when you log in initially, where it asks you to if you want to join the chat or not, it shows your video right there, whether I'm on my phone or on my laptop or iPad. There's a checkbox at the bottom that you can add your background to, and you just have to add a picture out of your photo album to it. It's a lot easier on my laptop than it is on iPad, but.
Well, I tried that, but it told me that, I mean, it didn't show well, and it said that's because I didn't have a green screen.
Did you unclick the green screen
as my
box?
default? Pardon?
Did you unclick the green screen box?
I didn't. It didn't show. Yeah, it didn't show me one, but like I said, by the time I get Zoom figured out, we'll probably be meeting in person.
Do something different, right?
Hey, Jerry just got the Northern Lights going on behind him.
Yeah, I got an app that emulates a webcam. So no matter what platform you're using, you select that as your webcam, and you can change your background and use it across the board.
I like it.
I guess I'll have to. I thought I'll have to send you a picture of some nice, cute lion cubs or something you can put up there behind you.
I think in the last few months, I've used just about every virtual meeting platform there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we sure added Zoom to the nation's lexicon.
Yeah, and how that happened, you know, it's amazing. I've had a GoToMeeting subscription for over 10 years. And you know, it's made it built for business, just like WebEx, et cetera. But all of a sudden, well, they're all pay platforms. So Zoom jumped up and they were free. So, you know, and then once it gets going on social media, it only takes a day or two.
Mm-hmm. I think schools were using Zoom quite a bit. And when universities and that shut down, it took off.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't know how capitalized they are, because the big boys, like, well, Google has their, Google Classrooms now, and a lot of these bigger tech companies are going to come up with stuff. So it'll be interesting to see. I do once with the Forest Service, and they do something called Adobe Connect. Nobody I know of uses Adobe Connect except the Forest Service.
Okay, I think we've got everybody back in the room. So we will move on to our next public hearing, which I will open at 8:08 p.m. And this is file 20-010, Development Code Amendment, Chapter 17.78, Annexation Code Amendments. As before, we will be giving opportunity for public testimony, both are in favor of, opposed, or neutral. If you want to participate, when we come to that time, if you're on Zoom, click the raise hand button at the bottom of the screen at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized. If you're participating via telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized. I'll call for any abstentions from anybody on the commission. Okay, nothing. Any ex parte or conflicts of interest to declare or mention? Okay, nothing seen or heard. Any ex parte contact?
And Jerry, just to make it really confusing for you, since this one is legislative, the question about conflicts of interest is appropriate, and whether anybody has any abstention to declare, but the really the rest of it is only applicable to quasi-judicial, including the ex parte contact issue. So.
Okay. All right, so I'll move to my older legislative.
Chair, do we have to, I think it was said last time, the emails from Ms. Walker aren't applicable because they're public record now that were received late today?
Yes, they're in the record.
Thank you.
Okay, any challenges to any individual members? And Kelly, if you see a hand raised, let me know.
Nope.
Okay. If you testify, you must raise all issues at this hearing. Your comment should state why the legislative amendment should or should not be approved, or include proposed modifications you believe are necessary for approval according to the standards. If you do not raise specific issues at the final evidentiary hearing or by close of the record, or fail to provide statements or evidence to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal the decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that particular issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Any party has the right to request a continuance of the public hearing, or in the alternative, to have the record remain open for 7 days. Staff report. Emily.
Right.
Hi.
I'm going to, share the screen. I can't share the screen. It says host disabled my screen sharing.
Kelly?
Are you getting her permission to share her screen?
You're muted.
You're muted, Kelly.
It says all panelists shall share screen now, so I think I'd fixed it.
Okay, I'll try it again. Yep.
Okay.
Great. So just have one slide really to summarize the proposed code changes to the annexation code, chapter 1778. The main intent really was to clarify the annexation criteria regarding public facilities and services, and also to clarify submission requirements, specifically regarding compliance with city plans like comp plan, transportation plan, parks and trails master plan. Also the transportation planning rule findings, which are related to Oregon's statewide goal 12 and are always an ODOT requirement. And then also the FSH mapping, which is already a requirement in the code, but just to clarify a little bit more what that entails. And then clarify annexation type for properties that want to annex and come in with a zone change to parks and open space and or the FSH overlay, which has come up a few times. So that would be a type B because it is a zone change. And then increasing the noticing distance. Currently in the code, I think it says 300 feet, which would actually now be 500 feet, but bumping that up to 1,000 feet, since it does affect the city as a whole more. So increasing that noticing distance, and then increasing the waiting period to 10 years for properties that have significant tree removal. So those are kind of the main, five items. And then I do have the actual code if we want to look through it. I know you'll have copies as well, but we can kind of go through it either now or later, or however you want to do it. If you have questions, so I guess I'll stop screen sharing for now. And then if we want to look at it, I can screen share again with the code.
And then just the only thing I would add on to that is we did receive, and it should be in the record and it's online. In addition to Ms. Walker's comments, we received written testimony from Tracy Brown, and we received, I believe, written testimony from Fair Housing Council of Oregon. Did I get it right this time? Yeah, okay. So that should be included on the online packet.
And a note from the Parks Board, it looks like.
Oh, correct.
Okay. Any questions of staff right now? Any issues anybody wants to raise that may help us, or when we get to public testimony? Otherwise, we'll move on.
So, Chairman, I just have a quick question. I haven't done one of these before in this setting. So will we get an opportunity to ask questions on the individual changes after after the public has presented their pros and opposition for it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. We get to tear it apart if we want to.
Okay. I'll hold then till the end.
Okay. Well, we will open up for David. A question I was wondering or trying to remember: do we have proponent and opponent testimony, or just general public testimony on these?
Generally, Chair, you just take testimony, but it's certainly fine if you also want to break it up into people in favor and people against. That's usually doing that more with quasi-judicial matters, but it's fine if you want to do that with this as well. Either way.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll keep them together only because that helps us clump them together, and our minds aren't going back and forth. So again, we're going to call for testimony in 3 different groups: those in favor, those opposed, or those neutral. If you want to participate at the appropriate time and you're on Zoom, click the raise hand icon. If you're on the telephone, you dial *9 to raise your hand. You have 3 minutes for your testimony. And as always, we ask that you begin giving us your name and your mailing address. So we will begin with, if you are in favor, proponent testimony, if you're in favor of the proposed changes to the Chapter 1778. Shake your head if you don't see anything, Kelly, because you're muted.
Ms. Walker's unmuted. She should be able to talk.
Okay. You have the floor, Ms. Walker.
Thank you for revising the Sandy's annexation code language. We believe it's as one of the fastest growing cities in Oregon that we can and should implement strategies to decrease that growth rate. We want this amended code to address the growth issues, including traffic, undersized and outdated infrastructure, and school overcrowding. We know that you cannot stop growth, but your policies and code can make it more discretionary than what we currently have in place. We look fondly back on the days when we could learn more about the proposal and vote on it based on the merits. Most importantly, we must ensure that we do not allow annexation of property that will lead to the city being responsible for development costs, including roads and utilities like we were in Bailey Meadows. The new code should spell out that properties that require development of neighborhood access roads outside city limits can and should be declined. Annexation should only be considered when landowners and developers agree to pay for the development of all infrastructure needed for the development. Oversizing water and sewer infrastructure can apply for SDC credits. The proposal for future SDC credits as proposed in Bailey Meadows should not be allowed, as it comes at the expense of taxpayer road funds. Developers must agree to road alignments that locate roads on their property instead of pushing it onto adjacent properties. Please make sure to reference trails and open space in all park-related language in this annexation language. We want to ensure our Parks and Trails Master Plan and future annexations give us the ability to have sole discretion, as is currently spelled out in the code, but legally challenged by Bailey Meadows developers in 17.86 of our city code. This language appears to do that, but because our Parks and Trails Master Plan amendment has not been adopted as of yet, I would ask that we ensure that the sole discretion language include our ability to make decisions in the next 6 to 9 months based on draft proposals in our Park Master Plan amendment. Please add a requirement that the notice and explanation of proposed annexations be posted on the city newsletter and on the city government Facebook social media site. Annexations affect all of us residents, not just the ones within 1,000 feet. Bailey Meadows is a great example of this. Annexations that propose zone changes are especially problematic because of the amount of analysis involved with the comp plan and needing to rejigger inventories. All that takes a lot of time. So when planners are already overloaded, and so are you with development proposals, all that analysis should be paid for by the developers. Zone change proposals should have to be included in the annexation request, or there should be a multi-year period where they cannot request a zone change once annexed. Once they are annexed in, they put more pressure on us, whereas if we knew what the zone change was to be, we might not have approved annexation in the first place. The proposed annexation code language is complicated, and I've not had time to fully digest all of it and understand what all is being proposed, what it means to us residents, and what we want to edit or expand in the language. The challenge we all face is with more devious developers that seek to threaten LUBA appeals and lawsuits to exploit loopholes in our language once they annex in. Perhaps there could be a clause in there that prohibits these actions if they are annexed in. Your language that says that they must meet all the plans does not cite the chapter and verse of all the code, TSP standards, ADT standards, etc. So what is to stop Mr. Robinson from challenging us on that once it's annexed in? It would be deja vu all over again. I would also say that annexations should not be allowed to do a planned unit development unless that is spelled out with the annexation proposal. The PDs are so vague and will result in more high density growth when we already have large areas zoned for medium and high density growth. These annexations changes will help in that vein, in that it will help ensure annexations are only done when they benefit Sandy residents. I worry about what we're missing. Annexations should only be approved when they can demonstrate they are responsible developers agreeing to pay for their development and not stick it to us. They need to agree to follow our existing code while making a reasonable profit and not be asking for numerous variances that only benefit themselves. I'll be providing additional input, as will many other members of the public, to the City Council before this is finalized. Please know that when if any of you people come to the meetings, it's not because they don't care, it's because they don't know what's being proposed. They don't know about the meeting, they don't know what's being proposed, and they don't understand all the gobbledygook techno talk that, you know, you all know by heart. And I congratulate you on how much of a learning curve you've climbed on that facet. So I believe it's better to get the word out early with all this stuff so that people can give you input before it's getting to the very, you know, end where you've already got a staff report and you're just giving a thumbs up and thumbs down. It really helps us all to have better communication. It's our collective future, and thank you for your considerable volunteer time and hard work to make our city better. Kathleen Walker, 15920 Southeast Bluff Road, in case I didn't start off with that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. I have another hand up from Erin, so I will unmute her.
Hi, this is Erin Finley. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. It's 37616 Rachel Drive here in Sandy. And I am one of those residents who is on a huge learning curve and have pulled back on occasion because I don't completely understand this process. I'm just going to put it out there. I'm not originally from Sandy. I am from an area of very high explosive growth that once had orange groves. It was very telling for me to listen to our council and see testimony from two different previous mayors who both felt strongly that development should pay for development. And I'm just here to ask that you continue to look at these codes and continue to add what you need to really protect Sandy. It might have been that there was a time when we were encouraging growth for fear that it might not come. And I don't know if that's the case for those that have lived here for a long time, but I think it's a guarantee at this point, even with a given recession. And the biggest challenge now is to be able to get ahead of that. So I thank you guys for the work you're doing. And I'm going to continue to participate and listen. And I just hope that we can have this not fall on the backs of residents financially or on the city on a regular basis. We can have some real thoughtful growth in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Next up, I have somebody that is labeled as Jim, and I will unmute that individual at this time.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name's Marie DeBatty, 37176 Rachel Drive, Sandy, Oregon. I think what I would love to see you guys do is when something is going to be annexed in to the city, that you really take notice of what you're putting in, you know, with streets and everything. This property that was annexed in is in the middle of a farm field. All farms are around it. And I don't know why the city, when they annexed this property in, didn't see, you know, the roadways, you know, in and out. They didn't see how that was going to play out with a development. And I think if the city would have looked at this a little closer, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in now. And so I'm asking you to, you know, anything else that's going to be annexed into the city of Sandy, you know, if you could look and see all the ins and outs of it, so we're not in the situation we're in now. Thank you. I'm so appreciative of all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's just give it another minute. I don't see any other hands raised yet. No other hands raised.
Okay, we'll give opportunity for any other public testimony.
I do not see any additional hands raised.
Okay.
Wait 1 second. I want to lower all. Hold on 1 second. After people talk, they usually don't lower their hand. Let me just lower them, and then I'll make sure there's nothing from earlier in the meeting. Okay, I don't see any additional hands.
All right. Emily, any recap? Or
I'll just reiterate that the intention of these code changes is to really kind of clarify both the criteria for annexation as well as the submittal requirements. And we did add as one of the intents of the annexation code to ensure that public facilities are or will be available to serve land annexed to the city. And then under the criteria section, we included that the council may require an agreement, like an annexation agreement with developer, and David can probably go into it a little bit more, but that would give council the ability to to kind of determine some things up front before the annexation, how they see fit. So I don't think it would necessarily require something to be signed, but it gives the flexibility and the possibility of having an agreement up front at the annexation stage rather than the future development stage. So again, I mean, these changes are kind of to address some potential weaknesses in the code and to really clarify.
Yeah, and before David, because I would like his input on this as well, but before he goes into it, we did work very closely with another attorney and Mr. Doofman at Barry Elsner and Hammond with drafting these code changes. I think most of what you see as proposed code changes are being drafted and incorporated into annexation codes around the state, as far as doing a lot of facility planning and proving before you annex a property that you can actually comply with all the local adopted master plans and comprehensive plans. I would like to address Mr. Tracy Brown's comments too. I think he hit the nail on the head really in saying that if you want to make annexation a little more difficult, then adopt these changes. If not, then deny all the changes. That is the intention, is to make annexation a little bit more difficult. I think as the public has testified, both tonight during this legislative hearing and during other land use processes in the recent past, is there's a lot of public outcry about making our code a little bit more robust in the sense of people, before they can annex and develop their property, to prove that they can meet all of our plans and all of our minimum regulations. So I think Mr. Brown is correct in that, in his written comment, is that is the intention, is to make it a little bit harder to annex and to be a little bit more selective about annexation, because I think the process honestly has been a little too nilly-willy. Like you said earlier during the last quasi-judicial hearing, is that typically when we get these annexations, we have no idea what they're going to do with the property. They're basically just annexing, and then we find out later what the proposal is. And sometimes that's years later. I think what we want to do is avoid that. And I do agree with Ms. Walker and Ms. Finley and Ms. Dabadie in that what we are looking to achieve with these annexation code changes is more responsible growth that adheres to our future forecasted planning. And that's all being done during the transportation system plan, which is underway, during the parks master plan, which is underway, when we revise the comp plan eventually. And these annexation code changes, in accordance with the advice we've received from our attorneys, is that will help. That's one thing that we can do to help plans in the future. So, and I'll turn it over to David. I'm sure he has some other stuff to add.
So annexations have always been one of those points in the process that have a combination of land use elements and then really what I would call political considerations. At its core really is, does a city want to expand its boundary? In Oregon, it is closely tied to a lot of land use issues. In some jurisdictions, it's not in Oregon, but in other states, it's really just a matter of, and this has, I think, policy positives and some policy negatives, but it's really just a matter of, do we want to expand our city limits or not? In Oregon, there are criteria that sort of go along with that are based in land use. But one of the things that we always think about is sort of on a continuum, where our clients have the most sort of discretion when it comes to making decisions, land use related decisions, and where they have the least. And annexation proposals is one of those areas where you have some of the most discretion, because it still does come back to the core of it being, do you want to have your city boundaries expand or not? The city historically was one of those that had a voter annexation process that the legislature a few years ago nullified, not just Sandy's, but throughout the state. And in fact, that was appealed. The city of Corvallis had appealed that piece of legislation. And that most recently, actually, the Supreme Court of Oregon upheld prior decisions that said, yes, the legislature had the authority to do that. So as of right now, state law doesn't allow for voter-approved annexations anymore, even if it's in your charter or in your code or otherwise. And you've seen that in the past. I know that's not news to most of you on the commission anyway. But I don't know that process in voter-approved annexations. City had approved that before I started working with the city. But I assume that a piece of that, a part of that, was very much about this idea that, yes, there's a land use component to this and a growth component, but we also want to have, a say whether we want to have our boundary expand or not. And since that piece now is no longer available, a lot of cities, as Kelly alluded to, have been sort of revising annexation codes and allowing for a lot more discretion in terms of what the criteria are. And so, and also, I think taking a harder look at making sure that properties that are going to be annexed are also able to be adequately served with city services according to adopted city plans. The historical kind of wisdom, I think, was that it's in the UGB and therefore it must be able to be served. And while I guess on paper there's some truth to that, oftentimes that UGB process, when you're expanding the UGB, that's, you don't get into that level of detail. And that certainly was true in Sandy's most recent urban growth boundary expansion. There were some things that we can do under state law that weren't done, and transportation issues being one of those. So bottom line is that if these were passed, I think what you're really doing is saying it may make it more difficult, but it's also really a matter of sort of saying, okay, well, let's make sure that before stuff comes in, the person that's applying for annexation can show that whether it's transportation, whether it's parks and recreation, whether it's sewer, water, what have you, that it can meet what the city's adopted, and we don't get into situations where there is any sort of lack of adequate services available to serve that property. And doing it at this stage with the amount of discretion you have makes some good sense. So that's sort of the spirit behind the changes.
I have on my list, the next thing is rebuttal by the public. Is that normal, David? I'm not sure how to handle that.
Yeah, we'll have to make sure you've got your scripts seem like they're not, I thought we got those updated for you, but we'll have to make sure. No, at this point, there wouldn't be any rebuttal is really one of those quasi judicial things. So no, you could hear from staff certainly, and if there are any more public comments, that's okay. But there's not really any rebuttal right at this point.
Okay. I thought it just caught me as being strange. So we're at our discussion point. One question that came to my mind, I'm just wondering, David, you had made the comment, you know, that the standards for annexation kind of help us answer the question, do we want to expand our city limits? Like, where it made me wonder is we have our city limits, and then we have to do the growth boundary, the urban growth boundary, based upon the research for how we're going to grow. But so is it even possible to say, yes, that's our growth, that's our urban growth boundary, but we don't want to expand into it? Or would it come to a point conceivably where your hand is forced that you have to?
So yes, I mean, conceivably that's been a thing that a few people have taken a run at with the legislature, and they haven't adopted it to date. And maybe I'll just rephrase your question slightly. You tell me if I've accurately done that. But basically, where could there be now a next level where state law wouldn't give you that much discretion over annexations and whether you want to expand your boundary, but rather as long as it meets certain state mandated criteria, you have to bring it into your city limits. And is that a fair summary of what you were asking, Chair Crosby?
Yeah, because it kind of makes possibly the urban growth boundary a moot point. It's just, it may be meaningless if in fact we don't have to expand into it.
Yeah. Yes, that is always possible. It's still not, theoretically, as long as you have criteria that aren't satisfied, the annexation requests can always be turned down, and those criteria can be really discretionary, like some of the ones you see here, where is it in the city's best interest or not? But there have been discussions on that point. I don't know, I can't remember how close it got, but you get a lot of folks that are on various sides of the aisle, to be candid with you. You know, those that are on more of a housing, interest, that have interest in housing issues, builders and developers. They sort of line up on this issue, which is that in order to make sure that sort of keeps humming, that would be potentially the next step legislatively, where cities would have a lot less discretion when it comes to annexation. But right now, it's a good point. You theoretically could end up with this urban growth boundary that you've determined is there to meet needs over a 20-year period, and potentially not grow into that if you deny annexation requests. And as of right now, as long as you're making that decision based on adopted criteria, that's okay legally.
Okay.
Jerry, I have a procedural question.
Go ahead.
Since it's not an application or whatever, I may ask David this. My suggestion is we close the public hearing so that we can just have discussion, and we don't have this ongoing discussion with public raising their hands, and they're part of our discussion essentially. So my suggestion is we close the public hearing. I appreciate on David's comment.
Sure, go ahead and make a motion and see if you get a second. I probably will.
I'll move we close the public hearing.
I second that.
Motion has been made and seconded to close the public hearing. The time is 8:42. All in favor say aye.
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 All right, sorry, I had to unmute.
Any opposed? Okay, public hearing portion is closed.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. I wrote down quite a few different things on this, and I appreciate David's comment, and I've read Tracy's, and I do agree kind of with Kelly on, and actually Tracy on some of these. Um, you know, I'm really glad for the public input. Right or wrong, Bailey Meadows has got some people, you know, paying attention to what's going on and providing input. You know, for those that haven't had a chance to, I mean, we did the urban growth study, and that wasn't done on the back of a napkin. Maybe Kelly can talk a little bit about that, but there was a great amount of analysis. There's a map. They used a rating process, and one of the rating process was availability of the, you know, city services. And we annexed when we basically, you know, brought stuff into the urban growth boundary. They were the ones with the highest scores, having a high likelihood, you know, that they could access or whatever. So it isn't like the urban growth study was done in the back of a napkin, whipped it out in a week, and now we went and did something. That's an extremely detailed study. So that kind of concerns me a little bit. The other one, I do agree with Tracy in that there's kind of an assumption here. If that's when they want to annex their land, they want to develop. And it just seems like we have a tremendous amount of code that developers have to do when they make an application for a subdivision. And, you know, as I read some of the statements, I mean, David, I know you have gone through this and recommended it. It seems to me like there's a lot of potential subjectivity. You know, like one change is inserting a B, it's ensure the public facilities are or will be available to serve. I mean, how do you do that? What's the criteria, you know, kind of for doing that? Over on 177850, the first one that's been inserted today is the annexation shall not have an adverse impact on the citizens of Sandy, either financially or in relation to livability of the city or any neighborhood within the annexed area. I don't know how you objectively evaluate that. So my concern is, you know, and for the public, you know, as long as there's two lawyers, it's going to be lawsuits. David will account for that. And so, you know, that's just something to get used to. And so my concern, David, and I appreciate your comment here, is I just given you a couple, but I'm concerned about some statements that are in here that I think if we, as a planning commission or city council, use to deny an annexation, city council, that it would generate lawsuits because of arbitrary, capricious. I mean, how do I decide if it has an adverse effect? That's a subjective term. And you know, it's, I mean, every subdivision, anytime somebody builds a house, there's going to be more traffic. Is that an adverse effect? Now, I'm concerned about not the entire thing. I'm concerned about in general those. And I guess my last comment, and then I'll turn it over to some other folks to talk, is, you know, I became aware of what we're doing here just the last few weeks. It seems like, you know, we might, you know, we when we did the urban growth boundary, we had hearings. The room was full. And everybody who wanted to be annexed stood up and said, "Yeah, we want to be annexed." 20 or 30 different people testified. You know, it seems like do all these people that are in the urban growth boundary who understand what is being proposed, it seems like we need to notice all of those people so that our process is fully inclusive, because those people have rights too. Developers have rights. City of Sandy residents have rights. And it seems like, I agree with Tracy a little bit, it seems like if you take the words on a conservative basis, a tremendous amount of work and time and cost would have to be incurred by someone who wants to just annex when that work would have been done if they decide they want to develop. Maybe they don't even want to develop. They just want to annex. So, you know, I'm kind of on the fence here. I'm not against it, but I think it needs more work personally. And I think it needs more input or an opportunity for input for anybody who's in the urban growth boundary, particularly those that were newly brought in. Do they even know what the city's thinking about doing here?
Yeah, if I can jump in, that was one of my, I noticed there wasn't a lot of public input, and I was a little surprised by that because there is a lot of property that's inside Sandy's UGB and outside the city limits. So whether you agree with the sort of planning theory of whether you analyze this in detail at the time of annexation or afterward, it affects a lot of property. So I guess I was just a little surprised there's not more public participation in the process. And I guess I had kind of similar concerns as Dawn, just about the subjectivity of some of that, and what the effect of having a pretty subjective approval criteria might be. I did have some, I guess I'll pile on here. I had another kind of in the weeds comment about mitigation. And maybe we'll keep it at a high level till we get into that level of detail. But those are some of my thoughts.
I'll jump in next then. Why not? I agree with both of the previous commissioners. When I read through it, I felt more of, I referred back to Bailey Meadows as an example of how we got here, and I was hard pressed to vote no against anything with Bailey Meadows because there was nothing definable within the code to allow me to do that, and that's just my opinion there. So when I read this, I thought I would have something that was more clear, and why I love the direction that we're headed. We are trying to make it more restrictive and more compliant. I weigh, first I looked at what are the pros and the cons of annexing property, and you can go back through that litany of, well, the property value raises and they get city services, but then there's also the cons of taxes grow. So there's all these things that the owner gets. So what does the city get from it, and what impact will it have on our future growth? And I'm a believer that we want to grow, and I believe we want to grow sensibly. We want to grow responsibly, and we want to grow at a rate that our infrastructure can keep up with. But as I read this, I urged for more detail, and I had several questions, and I think I found some of my answers when I read ORS 222111. I think some of the what I thought were, when I read Tracy's letter, it said like, where did you come up with 10 years? And I think that's where that might have been pulled from. It kind of lines up with what the state's doing in their statutes. And I could be wrong on that. That's just a guess. But then I also read, what the Fair Housing Council said. And I guess that's a question for me is why were they not included in the discussion to get there? At least that's what they implied, is that they didn't receive any information. And like Todd just said, I was skeptical because we don't have a ton of feedback on this. And you think after everything that we just endured with Bailey Meadows, I was expecting to see a lot of feedback from the public on it. So I'm just curious how many people actually know about this. And I don't claim to be an expert at code writing. I just believe in getting the word out to the public so they can provide their feedback so that we can listen to it and we could make objective decisions that we use quantifiable data to make the code more clear as builders come into the city and try to do things, that it's written in black and white. And I guess that's a long way of saying I think we have more work to do to define this a little better.
Ron, you need to be unmuted.
I didn't know it was even muted. Kelly must have done that on purpose, I'm gonna think. I agree with the previous three commissioners. I'm just looking down here at my notes. I think my underlying this is a good first cut. When my underlying thing is 2 words: managed growth. We went through the urban growth boundary. We talked about those different reasons. Now, how do we kind of move into that territory to make sure our roads line up, our parks, etc. And I think this is a step towards it. Although that's the first word I had was there's just too many subjective things to it. So it needs some work on that. And a little bit coming back from some of the comments and having to do or having been on the commission for the past 10 years, I got involved because I never really paid any attention before, but then when things started to affect me, then so going back, Commissioner Maiden, to your comment, I think that the reason we haven't heard anything, it really hasn't affected anybody. If you're next door to annexation, you'll probably be here. But until you're in the thick of it, and we're trying to be in the thick of it, looking out down the road for all the people within Sandy. And I heard a couple times, heard tonight was, I'm in the club now, kind of keep everybody else out, right? It's the size I want. And growth is healthy. We could have some revitalization in different areas. I think this is just too vague. And then on one side, it's too specific. The 5-year tree going to 10 years. I don't know where that number came from. I think 5 is plenty on it. But anyway, that's my general comments.
When I first read this, like a lot of others, my first thought was, what are other people doing? What are other cities doing in the general locale that we're in? Just because, for reference, they're close, and are they doing similar things? David and Kelly said that other cities are doing these things. Well, I went on to a couple other cities' sites to research this, and almost all the new points that staff has added are in other annexation codes. And some of ours are a little bit more elaborate, where others are very bullet pointed. But in general, this is really right in line with other cities in our area, what they're doing and what they're requesting. Now, I agree with Ron to a certain extent on this. It's a good first run. It'd be a pretty good work group project if we were to get, but unfortunately we can't get together and have dinner and talk about these things right now. I also agree with Ron on the 5-year or 10-year tree suggestion on here as well. I think Kelly also mentioned that. What's previous Kelly?
Tracy.
Yeah, Tracy. That's
John, are you done?
I'm done.
Were you done? Okay.
I'm done.
Okay. I appreciate everybody's comments. I agreed with a lot of them. And I appreciated, John, you're saying that that these are kind of in line with what other cities are doing. I guess, like the rest of you, I really want to see us do responsible growth. And I think that if we aren't careful, things kind of jump through our fingers, and then our community and our citizens are left to deal with those for generations. And it's been my feeling over the last few years that it's almost like if you get your foot inside the urban growth boundary, then you expect the city to provide these certain things for you. And what one of the citizens said earlier was for development to pay for their development. And I think we do have to keep that in mind, that if developers, if if land is annexed and then the developers come along and they assume that the city is going to put all of these things into helping their development be profitable, somewhere in there has to be, some balance. And I'm not sure what that is, but it feels like what's been given to us here is really good. I like the idea of maybe a work group to massage it a little bit. I don't know. I still think we could do that. We just have to sit 6 to 8 feet apart. But for people who wanted to do that. But it also seems strange that we haven't had more community input. And maybe that's just because everybody's overwhelmed with the pandemic. But these are big decisions. I do want us to be careful about how we're annexing property and setting up the city to take on a lot of responsibility and expense, rather than the developers doing some of that or most of that.
I have one more comment, if you're done.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the other cities, they kept their notification range at 300 feet, and moving it to 1,000 is more in line with what Kathleen Walker was talking about, getting more people in the area involved. We can't take it to a vote anymore, so that's not bringing the whole city into it, which you see where that would be a lot closer to what Kathleen Walker's looking at.
Yeah, the 1,000 feet sounds like much more inclusive.
Absolutely.
I'll just
I have
add
one more. I had a question I
Ron.
wanted to ask of maybe Kelly, and just a general question. Is there any benefit as a landowner to being annexed without building? Okay, or just so, because again, as we put it in, I have a piece of property, I want to annex it into the city, but now I've got to come up and put in place what I'm going to, much more detailed plans than before. I mean, that's kind of the quick of what you're asking for.
Yeah, you can hook to sewer, water, you get police service, so you're not waiting on the county sheriff to show up for an extra 20 minutes. I mean, if it's anything really egregious, my understanding is Sandy PD would respond. But if it's something less egregious, they wouldn't respond to it and you'd be waiting on the sheriff. And then sewer and water. So yeah, if you have you wouldn't have to put a sand filter system in, or if you have a smaller lot. So those are the main benefits. You also get like cheaper internet and some other smaller benefits like that.
Street lighting, maintenance, right? Snow removal.
that would only be added if you develop. So if you just annex and you don't develop, there's very few benefits. So you're paying higher taxes, but you're paying higher taxes because now you have a police force that's more at your disposal, and you can actually hook to utility services you couldn't previously.
Well, that's what, does it allow me to do that under the new proviso?
Certainly. Yeah, certainly, that wouldn't change.
You just have to provide the description of how you would get water and sewer to the property.
So if I can add some clarity here. Work groups and everything are fine and dandy, but as David said, the annexation process is as much political and legal as land use. Emily and I, we spent a little time on this code. It was mainly Chris with Barry Elsner and Hammond and David. I don't know what a work group would really resolve in, because we're having our legal team look at it, and they're basically changing annexation codes for other cities. And we asked them to take a look at ours and add some additional clarity to our code that will make sure that we do have responsible growth and that annexations don't result in negative impacts to the city's budget or services. The other thing I wanted to state is that a lot of times during these legislative hearings, you don't get a lot of public input. So we don't get the public input, as many of you know that have been on commission for a long time. The code changes is where we should get the input, because that's what's actually making the big impact down the road. but typically we get all the public input when there's an actual proposal, like a quasi-judicial hearing. The legislative changes typically don't get much more public comment than we've already received tonight. You know, if you guys recommend to go back to the drawing board, it's just going to be, I mean, you can recommend that. It's just going to be attorney time. Staff really doesn't have a lot of time to devote to this, and we didn't really write a lot of what's being proposed. The tree code changes are rather subjective, but so was the 5 years. So there was no magic to that either. If you want to see it remain at 5 years, we could remove it back to 5 years. There's no issue with that. But a lot of the substantive changes were done by attorneys. So I don't really know how much staff's really going to be able to change or work on or revise. So I don't know if David has more input to that, but I hear you loud and clear, but I don't really know what we could add more specificity. But I mean, ultimately too, you got to realize it is going to be a council decision. So they have some discretion in deciding whether people that are annexing meet these different requirements or not.
Kelly, if I can, when you say going back to the drawing board, I think it's, at least for me, taking my comments and input way too hard. I think this is heading in definitely the right direction. That's what you were here today, is to give our input to. Is it just seems too subjective in many areas on that. I don't have any tonight recommendations other than the keeping the 5 years, but on the just the input to it. It's I don't like going into these and feel like I got to make a decision tonight that's going to have a huge impact. You know, so anyway, that's my kind of rebuttal on it. Is I don't think it's back to the drawing board. It's just tune up.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to make a decision. So the request that we got from City Council and from the public, by and large, was to start making changes to our code. And they wanted to see changes to the annexation process. They wanted to see the ADT standards added, which we're already working on. And so that's what we're attempting to do. Is we're trying to make changes quickly here. We're trying to be responsive to the requests of the public and to the council. If you want to see us work on this more, I think unless David has a different idea, we would need some direction on what you want to see exactly changed. Because I'm not sure I've heard that much tonight to be able to actually go back to the drawing board to Chris Crane and say, besides the 10-year back to the 5-year on the tree code, the other changes, I don't know what advice I would give to the attorney we've been working with, unless David has something that he thinks I've missed.
I think it would, sorry if I can jump in, I think it would be helpful to talk a little bit, either Kelly or David, just about some of the subjective pieces like 177850A. My read of that is that an annexation shall not have an adverse impact on the citizens of Sandy, either by this or by this or this. And one of them is just livability of the city. So to me, that's pretty subjective. So I mean, it would help to get your take on what that means then as we start to process annexations under a new code like that. What are the pros and cons? And I mean, I know you guys know what you're doing, so I don't mean to say we need to go back to the drawing board. Just
Other
like
metrics to livability?
Help us understand.
Well, is it really, one question is, I mean, is it really needed? I mean, do you get to where you want to go by having B? To me, by having A in there, you've just created litigation bait because it is subjective in terms of how you do it. So I would say,
Can I jump in for a
anything
second?
that looks subjective, does it really need to be there, or do you can get there with what else you have? Because your next one is very specific about, you know, you're going to look at all these different things like sewer and water and transportation. So, I mean, I just think there's plenty of stuff that's pretty solid there, but then the subjectivity is thrown in there for whatever reason. And just because some other city has it, that doesn't mean they got it right. That just means what they're doing.
It's our city that has it. That's a different code.
I'm going to let Emily have the floor because she's trying to, and I know those on the phone can't see, but Emily's been wanting to chime in. Go ahead, Emily.
177850A is our current code. That's what our code says now, and that's our only criteria really currently. So we did not add that as something new. It's just become an A so that there's other criteria as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was
Is,
highlighted blue, so I thought it was new.
Just because it got moved, yeah. And it just highlights it in blue as being cut and pasted to a new section. If you see it on the top under red, it's crossed out. So that's where it was removed from.
Okay,
Either
Hollis,
way,
So
Verify that.
Hollis, go ahead.
Oh, I wanted to hear from David a little bit more. I hear what everybody's saying about it being too subjective, but I think what I understood Kelly to say was that the city council needs to have some latitude, and that's appropriate. So am I understanding that, David?
So I think this is a great example of where, you know, what the difference between sort of policy and law and you know, what choices you get to make when it comes to these things. And I probably just didn't hit this hard enough at first. So, you know, let's talk about it a little bit again. But there is this range of this continuum, I guess I would say, of where, you know, decisions that you make regarding land use matters have to either be based in objective criteria. And gosh, we know all that well, right? Like we've just spent the last practically 12 months talking about clear and objective this and clear and objective that. And then, you know, where you get to exercise or can choose to exercise a lot of subjectivity. So in basically, like when you're talking about any housing application, used to be just limited to needed housing. Now it's any housing application, needed or not. Whether it's multifamily, whether it's a single family home on a lot of record. That's where that whole, you can only apply clear and objective criteria and nothing else is applicable. So you have very little discretion. You have to look at what criteria are clear and objective, and Oregon law says you can't apply any subjective criteria. The devil in that, of course, is that land use planning is by its nature a subjective exercise. You know, concepts of livability and what's compatible, and this is like the default language of land use planning is all of those things. It's a very subjective discipline, so it's really hard to impose what you get down to in clear and objective criteria. Ultimately, is really numbers and dimensions. To be honest, very little else usually satisfies that criteria. But so backing up, but that's what the statute says, and that's really limited to a basket of applications that are essentially subdivisions, partitions, you know, a design review application for a multifamily residential building. All of that would be, yes, we need to look at clear and objective criteria. Then on the other end of that continuum are decisions like maybe like conditional use permits and annexation decisions. That you can be very, very subjective. There's different reasons for that for a conditional use permit versus an annexation request. The reason that an annexation request can be so subjective, i.e., is it in the city's best interest? It gets back to that issue of these being historically very political considerations, i.e., like having a vote, right? There's nothing objective about people's voting habits. I mean, they may be grounded in certain objective facts, but most people are going to vote yes or no on something because they either like it or not, and they think it's a good thing or a bad thing. Myself included, all of us. That's just the way voting works. So annexations are meant, and still are, one of those areas where if you choose to, the city wants to, it can exercise a lot of discretion and apply a lot of subjective criteria. And so that then becomes, that's legally what your choices are. policy-wise, that's up to all of you, the city council staff, to inform you on what he thinks is the better policy about what kind of criteria you choose. So right now, these, as Kelly said, are largely sort of born out of a recognition that there's been a lot of talk about, infrastructure, whether the code does enough to deal with that. How are ways that we can make sure that, that responsible growth is happening? It's very difficult to sort of, as you well know, like to plan out every possible thing that you'd want to see in terms of criteria in any application. So oftentimes what'll be maybe the policy default choice is that, well, if in this situation a lot of discretion exists, then let's have that as part of our criteria. So essentially we'll know it when we see it, and maybe that develops over time. But that the city would be able to recognize, a proposal for annexation that is in its best interest when it actually gets that proposal. And so, if you think having that much discretion is I guess what I'm here to do is say, in this case, with this type of application in an annexation context, we believe you can exercise that much discretion if you want to. You certainly don't need to. And if you wanted to pare it back, I think it would look more like saying, something closer to what the code sort of currently looks like, where you maybe wouldn't necessarily have something that would say, there's probably different ways you could do that in terms of looking at, show, that you would have at least 2 accesses to an area that would be developed. And there's different ways you could do that, but you'd always be able to choose, well, we think that's too subjective. We'd like to make it a little bit more, narrow in focus. That's up to you, but it is one of those things. It's kind of, getting rarer and rarer, the way that Oregon law is going, where a jurisdiction has the ability to sort of say, when it sees something that it could decide that application on very subjective grounds. This is one of them. So.
I just think it's interesting as we go through it and again, I'm not saying Ford or whatever, but we get down on the trees of it's very specific in terms of diameter, length, etc. What you can do and not with the trees. And I guess I'm coming back to how do you put something in there that's somewhat vague but more specific in terms of the proposed annexation needs to align specifically with the transportation master plan. I mean, I think, I don't know if I'm making sense or not, but the tree is real specific and what goes along with it. And the other stuff is like, well, it's got to be, so.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't give specifics on mine. I just gave kind of a soapbox. So let me be very specific as I went through each page. I only have 3 things that really I had either questions or concerns or quantifiable changes with. The one is the tree retention. I'm okay with 10 or 5 or 6, 7, 8, or 9. It doesn't really matter. I was just curious of where the thought of 10 came from. So I'm interested to know more about where that number came from. The second is very similar to that. It's in 1778, 60, which is the 1,000. And John touched on that a bit. I'd like to just understand what the intent was for going from 300 to 1,000. Those 2 might clear up any questions I have if somebody could expand on that. The only one, and it's been talked about a lot, is 1778-50. I believe should be X'd out and stricken. I don't believe, I think it creates more questions. That's just my opinion. I think B really defines it because it directs them to the transportation plan, to the transit plan, to the park plan. It gives them criterion within those plans to meet. So I think by having A there though, it leaves just too much room. And I think it creates too much risk for us. And that's just my personal opinion. That's all I have. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
This is Don. Collis,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Don.
I just jotted down a few things. I started talking a little bit and got it rolling. A couple things. I'm a little concerned about making changes on the trees until we have a change in the tree code. And as you may recall, that was all going to get done within about 4 or 5 months here a while back, and it's been a long time. And I'm sure there's a reason, for that. But why are we changing this when we don't have the tree code done? I want to make a statement, and this is for everybody, but I want the public to understand this, and that is that we've got a lot of comments, and we got a lot of them on Bailey Meadows that said, well, we need to get affordable housing. Doesn't the state have a goal of affordable housing? And we got that thrown at us in a lot of testimony. Affordable housing, by definition, is high density housing because it means the smaller lots, it means apartments, it means condos, it means not single family residential. It means R2, maybe even R3. So, you got to keep in mind that obviously that creates more traffic. So we're trying to meet what the state wants, which is affordable housing. That means you put in higher density growth. That means you get more traffic. Our goal is we got to make that all work. But I want all of us and I want all the public to understand, be careful with every sword you throw out because it's got two sides and both of them are sharp. The other one that might come back on you in a way you don't really want. So I would ask David, what does a person do who wants to annex into the city for the reasons Kelly mentioned, but has no plans to develop? Are they shut out completely for something like that? And I guess the last one, this may sound clerical, but up front we have the forced annexation in case the property is surrounded by annexed property, of which we had that happen down where the old sawmill was. So if that happens, is the city the applicant? Is the city going to be the one who's going to go through and write up all of this and do all this work that a developer would probably have to do for somebody who's applying to annex, because the person who annexes owns the property? They're going to have to hire somebody to basically do it. So sounds like that's the job the city would end up picking up. But I think the 10 should stay at 5 till we get the other work done. I think A should go away, as Chris mentioned. I think it creates more problems, and I don't think gets you anywhere other than potential problems. So those are the key things. And on the 300, 500, or 1,000, it doesn't make a difference to me. My last concern is it's not that what we want to do is incorrect, but I think there's a lot of residents inside the urban growth boundary that don't have a clue what's going on, and then they're going to find out. And I think that regardless of the council wants to be in a big hurry, I think the city has a proactive responsibility. Noticed all those people and had them come and talk when we did the urban growth boundary. Have they all been noticed? It says, oh, we're going to make it a lot more detailed, and it may be difficult and more costly for you to annex, or changing the rules from when that other testimony was done. I want to slow it up. I just want to see the same opportunity for those people to talk to us as the people who have already talked to us.
I have 2 comments. One is about the tree code, the 5 to 10 years. I have been sitting on that tree committee, and I think there were several reasons why that stopped moving forward. We had a slew of developments that came before us at the very time that the planning department lost 2 people, and so they didn't have as much staff to deal with it. And then we had the pandemic come along. So there's a lot of reasons why the tree committee hasn't finished its work. I think that work is really important. One of the things that I learned by being on the tree committee is that, and we all know this, it takes decades for some of these trees to grow to where they're at. And we say we want to preserve them. And then what we hear from a lot of developers is how it's not financially as viable for them if they have to retain a certain amount of trees. And so it makes sense that you can go along and a property owner can take all the trees down knowing that they're going to sell that land to a developer, and it works in both of their interests. And 5 years isn't very long. So I think expanding that out to 7 or 8 or even 10 years will just reduce that potential of the trees being mowed down in order for a development to go in and the developer not to have to comply with the tree retention. So that was my first comment. And then I think my last comment is, I think it's in our interest and in the community's interest to tighten things and make it a little harder for people to get annexed. And then on a case-by-case basis, there's more opportunity for give and take and conversation than it is to open the floodgates and then try to restrict it. It's like with kids, you give them a little bit of freedom, and then it's easier to give them more freedom than if you give them too much freedom and then you try to restrict it. So I don't know. I liked the proposed changes.
I think that going back and opening the floodgates is not it. We're not, the discussion right now is the gates are at the opening that they are. You know, it's this is why we're talking about kind of narrowing the gate. All right. So I don't think, you know, I think your words, I don't know if you meant that or not, but we're definitely not talking about laxing anything, right?
No, yeah, we're talking about tightening it up because, yes, that's right. We're talking about tightening it up.
I think, because just as a thought, I think what you're doing is taking a bunch of the work that a subdeveloper would have to do when they built an application and came in front of the Planning Commission for approval or not. You're moving that work up prior to and requiring that work to be done before the annexation. The work's going to get done no matter what before houses get built, but you're requiring them to do it to get annexed, which means that when they do the subdivision, there's probably very little to do because of all the work they've had to do just to get annexed. So the work is you can, my point is that you can annex, but then you can also approve or deny a subdivision. The problem with Bailey Meadows has nothing to do with the annexation or any of this. It has to do with other code sections and how they were basically set up. So I want to be careful we don't extrapolate the current situation, you know, into a, like I say, a major problem. But I just see the work getting transposed from one place to another place. It's going to get done anyway. Assuming somebody wants to develop, I'm concerned that somebody can't get in annexed unless they're going to develop. It seems like there's an assumption there.
Can I get just a point of clarification on that from either Emily or Kelly? And maybe this will help me and maybe the public who doesn't know. When Don mentions the work's going to get done either before or after, when we're talking about the work, what does that mean? Because does that mean it's going to add tons of expense onto the landowner? Or is it just really a draft that they turn over to you? Is that just a written plan? Is that something that they have to get surveyed out? I mean, can you just give me some context around what that means?
I think it's really going to vary on how large the proposed annexation area is. If it's 100 acres, the potential impacts of future development would be much greater than a 5-acre parcel. So I think depending on how large the annexed property is, the more in-depth analysis they're going to need to do to prove to city council that they should be annexed and that they can show responsible growth. One thing we got to keep in mind also that I don't know if it's been discussed really, but when somebody does annex a property, typically their property value shoots up significantly, and that's because they have way more development rights. So if the individual doesn't have the wherewithal or the means to do the analysis, there's always options, and we see this all the time with development, that somebody goes into an option for purchase, and they condition the sale upon annexation or something like that. And that person that would be purchasing the property would actually be the one doing the studies and doing the analysis. We see this all the time with property development that's already annexed. Before property changes hands, a lot of people make it contingent on getting a conditional use permit or getting a design review. So it's not the current landowner a lot of times that's paying for that. It's the person that is going to be developing the property through the sale agreement. So I think we just need to be careful that I think some of the assumptions that we're making, that the current property owner would always be on the hook for paying for this analysis, that's not true. It may be true in some instances, but it would not always be the case.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. I just wanted to get that on the record, and I appreciate you saying that, Kelly.
This is Don. One last thing. I want to make sure we understood Emily correctly when we were just talking about what's there. Looking at 177850, which is actually the annexation criteria, which I think is the most important part of this whole thing. Anything in blue has been added. If you go clear back to the very end of that section, what you see in black on the middle of the next page is what's there right now. So the A has been added. It's not there now. The one that we're concerned about is subjective. And when I said, Chris, when I said sooner or later, if you read B, if you're going to develop, you're going to have to, show that you can do adequate facilities. And in fact, you're going to have to be real specific about it. Because some of these things that require a certain level of specificity before you technically can do them. That was one of Tracy's concerns. So, if you went to read through B, and if you went through and did all of that, you're going to have a good start on your application to develop. And that's where I'm concerned about, is that I think if you do that, it meets the need. I don't think you need A. I think A just creates problems. I think B gets you where you want to go.
I agree with you totally. I agree. I mean, B has all the descriptors in it. I thought A just led to openness that I didn't think need to be there too. So, but I've said that a few times.
Emily, I think you said that A was in the current code.
Yeah, let me share my screen really quickly.
I'm looking at the current code, unless I got it. I am the code on 9/16 of 17.
This is our current code, 177850, annexation criteria. Requests for annexation shall not have an adverse impact on the citizens of Sandy, either financially or in relation to the livability of the city or any neighborhoods with the annexation area. And then it goes on to the ABCD, which was the black at the bottom of the proposed changes. So the reason it's showing in blue again is because it was cut from here, this red area, and moved under here to a new A, so that we could add more criteria. Currently, that's the only criteria of our code is A. I don't care if it stays or doesn't. That's just why it's there. It's currently in our code, and we just haven't deleted it. We just added 2 new things, or 3 new things, I guess.
In just opinion, if it's written at the top of the header, it leads to the ABC leads to more descriptions of what that subjective livability or financial impacts might be. So it might be good descriptors in that context, but the way it was shown here as ABC just leads to me, it's one of the conditional criterion.
I agree, because your A, B, C, and D are now defining what your statement is above. So that sits better with me. I didn't have a problem where it was, but it makes more sense to be where it was.
And I think you can start the thing off by not even having it and just say the application to annex the property into the city shall meet the following criteria and start with B. It's clear and objective, and
that's what Chris is saying.
Et cetera. The other is, to me, I don't know, if somebody wrote it at one time, and just because they wrote it doesn't mean we need to keep it.
Yeah.
What are David's thoughts on this?
I don't see David.
Sorry, I'm in my office, and we have our the cleaning crew stop by, so I just wanted to let them know they need to come to my office. Yeah, I mean, it's as explained. I mean, it was there as criteria. It was put into that introductory section, and in the past, in how the cities looked at that as sort of in different ways, to be honest. At times it's been directly applied, and at other times kind of more consistent with Commissioner Mayton's take. I think it was Commissioner Mayton who said, you know, the specific A through D that follows it is what sort of fleshes that out. You know, what we did with this is just sort of say, look, the idea that we were, you know, bringing out with these changes was to increase the level of discretion. So let's take that from where it sits now and just pull it down into a specific Section A criteria. That was the basis for the change, but it technically was a criteria before, just not maybe put as clearly as it is now. So, but I mean, again, that gets back to this issue of, I think maybe the policy question for you, and we've, I think, gotten more, you know, specific responses on this is, you know, how much discretion do you think you want to have? And I would, you know, I think having A or not having A, that's exactly kind of within that realm of the choice, you know, that you get to make, and either way is legally defensible. Certainly, you know, with if you took A out and really kind of relied more on B and C, you'd still have E, which deals with sort of like, is this ultimately in the city's best interest in light of all this? I don't think that, you know, you would be poorly served. B would require, B and C particularly, require, you know, the applicant to show that, you know, not only is this a good idea, but here's why, and here's how the various, you know, infrastructure standards that you have are going to be met, how we can practically meet that. I do think a fair way to put it is that it tends to front load that analysis, whereas right now, those studies and that analysis is done at the time you come to develop, whether that's subdivision, whether that's design review, whatever it might be. It would be putting that up front and center at the time of annexation. And again, back to that issue of, that's a policy choice for the city. Does that make sense? I don't think it's going to, especially in a community that's growing and has been for a number of years as quickly as Sandy is, going to make a significant difference in terms of people being able to, that want to develop their property to be able to do so. It's very, very common. I guess as Kelly was saying, that a property owner would be, every once in a while, they actually develop the property themselves and spend the money, whether that's at the time of annexation or whether it's the time of subdivision approval or, you know, design review approval, to do all that's necessary to get entitled to actually build and get land use approval. Sometimes they do that themselves. But more often than not, they partner with a company or a person that is a quote unquote developer. And however it's sliced, whether it's at the time of annexation, whether it's at the time of development itself, that is reflected in the price that the developer pays for the property. I mean, that's just the way it works. And so, you know, one way or the other, the property owner will pay some or all of that cost. It's just a matter of how that deal is structured and when that cost would need to be absorbed, I guess is the better way to put it. So.
I mean, can I just throw one thing out there after hearing all the comments and concerns? I mean, one thing that could be looked at, and I don't even know how we would do this, but I'm just kind of throwing it. One idea is that for really small properties that don't have much development potential, and most likely are requesting annexation to be able to hook to city services, let's say like an acre or under, those properties would have a less robust analysis that they would be required to complete. So that would take care of
I like that.
I was going to say that would take care of your mom and pop property owners that are just looking to annex in, not necessarily develop. but need to annex so they can hook to sewer, say their septic tank is failing. That would potentially allow those people to annex without the costs associated with the analysis. But I don't know what the different analysis level would be, but that would be an option to look at, I guess.
And I meant to address that too, because I know that was a question I had written down. I'm sorry, I just hadn't gotten to it yet. But my note, I think it was from Commissioner Carlton, was, what about folks that want to annex without necessarily developing? And that's, that'll always be, it's really up to the owner. And I think, what we've put in here, we don't need to, but I think it's there as another tool, is, having annexation agreements or development agreements that could come with annexation. I think the idea that we had in our head, and that's maybe more common, a more common form of it is when there's going to be development, then, in order to make sure that certain infrastructure is in place when development happens, that could be accomplished also through an agreement. But there's also nothing to say that an applicant, you could do it as Kelly suggests, where you'd have a lower threshold. That makes sense. There's logic to that. You could also have that another option in addition, or as a separate way to do it, would just be to say that an applicant could always say, well, look, we're sort of going to voluntarily, we just want to do this for connection purposes in order to get access to water or sewer. And we agree that that's what we'll do for a certain period of time. That's always another possibility as well. So I think there's many ways that you could go about that, and certainly it shouldn't be a basis. If someone wants to do it that way, I would agree that there should be a way to make that happen without necessarily them having to go through a more detailed analysis, because again, this is really trying to get to situations where somebody will be intending to develop and making that work sort of happen at this stage rather than a later stage.
That's what I was trying to get towards, exactly that, of if somebody just wants to come in for whatever reason, it could be 10 acres, it could be 1 acre. I mean, fine. It's really, once you go into the development phase and expanding that above some certain threshold, I don't know if it's one house per the whole annexation or whatever the criteria is, but yeah.
Well, the simplest, I agree with Ron. I mean, I'll give you an example to take it to the simplest end. Our house is at the end of Hood Court, and the city property line, the city's limits goes right on my north boundary. And there's one house and one property to the north of me that is in that one lot is not in city, it's in the urban growth boundary. That's it, it's already developed. His septic tank failed. He wanted to connect to the city, went to the city let him connect to the sewer, and he didn't have to get annexed. So you have that situation too, as the city is allowing people to get access to city services without annexing. That's kind of a whole public works question. But I mean, that's what you can't get something simpler than one lot with a house already on it wanting to annex to the city.
I don't know how that, I'll just add some clarity. I don't know how that particular lot turned out that way. But typically the only way you can get sewer service, I believe, is either to annex or to sign an annexation agreement for like a failing septic tank. Typically it's an annexation, but I think there has been like service levels in both this city and the last city I worked in that were extended to failing septic tank properties that signed an annexation agreement. But I think that,
well, if you just want to, yeah, I mean, no big deal. If you just want to chase that, you know where I live. You can look at the lot. You can look at the city map.
Yeah.
And you'll see this little dotted line that goes around one little piece of property. You know.
Yeah, and that that gets
annexation agreement. I don't really know how that occurred, but I don't know.
That gets though to the issue of back to some of the typically there is a quid pro quo that comes with annexation often, at the risk of sort of talking about it in a crass way. A city often wants to be sure that, well, if we're going to be extending our services to you, that you're going to be paying the city's taxes, right? I mean, that's how those services are funded.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's not even unreasonable. That's sort of the way it works. Like, well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to be benefiting from particular city services, then the expectation generally is that you're also going to be paying part of the freight for those services. So that is true that you may have situations where, for whatever reason, there's an extension of services, even though the person's not within the city limits or the property owner or the property. And that type of annexation agreement is there basically to say, that's okay, that's fine, you know, we'll do that. But the annexation agreement is typically written to say at some point in the future, the city can just decide to bring you in, even if you object or a future owner objects. Because again, theory being that you're benefiting from city services that others in the city are paying taxes for, and ultimately you should too.
If I can, real fast, I got some good news and I got some bad news. Bad news for me, I got about 10 minutes left. I don't have a charger on my iPad here. Good news for you is I got about 10 minutes left. But one way or another, I'm watching my battery power go down, but my estimate is 10 minutes is what I have. So
I won't.
I don't know how to take care of that with Zoom meetings.
I don't want to belabor it, so I'll just ask one more time. Can Kelly or Emily give me the direction around the 1,000, from 300 to 1,000? Kind of what the intent of that is? Is that what John said, to just encompass more people in the conversation on the application?
Yeah, so our code actually was updated after this code section was updated. So I think the 300 currently would even be 500. But this would be, annexation would be a type 4 application. Our type 2s are 300, our type 3s are 500. Typically the higher the type, the kind of the more involved it is. So it seems more reasonable to kind of bring in more people. And we've heard from the public quite a bit. Certainly surrounding Bailey Meadows, which was only a 500-foot radius, but affected, you know, the whole neighborhood with properties beyond 500 feet. It just seemed that increasing it for a higher type made more sense. So this is an opportunity to do that.
Thank you. I just also want to just take a second to recognize and give kudos to the employees there. I think this is a great revision of the plan. There was, you know, we have a couple questions obviously, but I want to just give kudos for the work that you guys put into this, and recognize that we've been sitting here picking it apart for an hour, but I want to say thank you. You've done a great job. And for the record, I'm going to say I agree with Hollis on the tree retention. I would vote for either 8 or 10 years. In my personal opinion, on 78.50, I would either move A up into a header box and let it be the title, you know, intro, or strike it. And then I'm good with 1,000 feet as well. I like your explanation. Those are the only 3 things that I had questions with. Everything else I agreed with, and you did a great job. Thank you for letting me go. I'll stop asking questions now.
I second all of that.
Okay, that's where I was going next. And I appreciate, I've learned that if I just sit back and listen, that eventually you all will ask my questions and get the answers to the questions that I had. So I appreciate that. But to move it along, what it's sounding like, and I'll kind of do ask for individual input. Chris has already given his, and Hollis has echoed that. To move it along, it sounds like what we would be doing, just and not without running the risk of putting words in your mouths, is we would be passing it on to City Council. Well, actually, we have to, I think, pass it on to them one way or another, with our recommendation, with some suggested tweaks that would say, hey, we would like, if we had it ourselves, here's what we would change. And the only thing that I picked up in the discussion, change-wise, is that point A under dot 50, and there we've heard both. Some of you have felt to take it out. Chris just mentioned leave it in, but leave it as a header. I'm thankful, appreciate Emily showing us that it is there now. It was not a new text, even though it looked like it. There's been discussion on the tree retention, whether, you know, why we go from 5 to 10. I'm surprised Don has not given us his suspicion of any number that ended in 0 yet. And I think Chris got your explanation on the 1,000 feet for the notification. It is just to get more people. It's a simple thing, you know, they just punch a different number into the computer to kick out. It costs a little bit more postage is all it does.
And then the 3 zeros too, Jerry.
Oh yeah, that one does. Are there
I don't want to lose my reputation here.
Are there other concerns that I haven't been able to catch that would work itself into a motion for us moving it on to city council?
I think the other one is, in case, so if I lose you, if I can, I've got, anyway, is the tree. I'm absolutely set on 5, no more on that. And the number A, I think we should just strike it out completely, even though it was there before. That's probably the most subjective thing that we have in there. And then the other one was, David brought up at the end, is something to include. Somebody just wants to annex because of their sewer or whatever, so they don't have to go through the whole rigmarole for that. I'm not sure if it states it in there. I don't think it does. So anyway, those were mine.
Yeah, and I had the same thought on, because one of my questions was, are these changes targeting property owners or developers? And I appreciated Kelly's comment that, you know, rarely is it really a property owner. It's usually a property owner in cahoots with a developer. But yet, given the example of just a single lot or, you know, a small thing, I don't have the zoning map in front of me to be able to say, well, there's one and there's one that could potentially. It just seems like a lot of work for somebody who wants to get Sandy Net, you know, or who wants to get a sewer hookup. And for me on the trees, I would go more for the 5, just because 10 years is a long time. And for a property owner to say, oh my goodness, you know, 8 years ago I cut those trees and now I can't do anything. And they weren't even thinking of development when they did it. They didn't do it for the purpose of being able to sell it. They did it to be able to sell the property to a developer. They did it to harvest the trees for their own needs. 10 years is a long time for anything. And that's my thought. But the lower standard, or the lower, what we use the phrase threshold. And all we would be saying, I think, in the motion is that if we are in agreement that we would like to see something that would address that situation.
A minimum of 5 years.
Takes a lot longer to grow a tree, Chair.
Pardon?
Yeah,
it takes a long time to grow a tree back that got cut down.
It takes a very long time.
And I'm not on the tree committee, but
yeah.
Well, I mean, this goes back again with the remaining thing. I just think it's ironic. I just feel kind of forced here to come up with a recommendation and move it through. Whereas we go about the trees, and it's been a year since the tree committee started on this, and they haven't got that out. So now, what's more important, of trying to get this right and put together, or not? So
I did see an ORS 222111, and it was either 111 or 840. One of those two. I was looking at it. they had 10 years as their limitation for tree retention if somebody cut the tree down previously. They made them wait 10 years, and that's in the state statute, I believe. I'm not positive of that. So that's why I felt lining up with more of what Hollis was suggesting, even maybe going to 8 years just buys a little more time. I said earlier, I don't really care about 5. I'm okay with 5 too, if that's what the consensus is. I just trying to recognize that if a property owner does do something, we do have an inherent responsibility to protect the trees in Sandy, and that is something that could help do it.
But having said that, though, a person could cut the trees and cut them all and wait 11 years, and you haven't protected the trees. So we're not really protecting the trees. To be honest, we are prohibiting somebody from clear cutting for the purpose of selling it, making it more saleable, because they could just wait 11 years and they're fine. And you just said, everybody said, it takes forever for a tree to grow. So in 10 years, you're not going to have much. If they had cut them and replanted the next day.
Yeah, there still won't be much tree there.
Yeah.
But to your point, that's 10 years. That's a long time, right, Chair? That's a long time to make a developer wait for that property.
The bigger one is, how do we put code in place not to cut them down, but to make development happen while still retraining those mature trees? It doesn't have to be one or the other, but right now that's typically what it is. Okay, and that's what I'm all about. Is how do we go through and make it attractive for developers that say, hey, it's really worth it to keep this grove over here to do this. Right now, it's not.
I have a suggestion, because I think that the tree issue is really important to consider in the annexation issue. Maybe we could agree to keep the 5-year for now and wait for, and then possibly make an amendment to that when the tree committee comes forth with some recommendations. Because I do think the tree committee needs to finish doing its work.
I'd agree with that. That's kind of my whole point is I want to see that committee get done. You for those who were around a year ago, you know where I was. I was kind of a stick in the mud because I know how these things go. If people are committed to get it done, and if it's voluntary, it seems to go on forever. So
I would support that.
I would say.
Okay, let me try and land this plane before tomorrow.
Jerry, sorry to squash your momentum, but I have one small kind of in the weeds comment I think would help improve and that's 177850C, where it says the application demonstrates how impacts to existing city facilities and services from development of the property will be mitigated, and then mitigation may include XYZ. I would add just a couple words in there to say will be mitigated if necessary. So I've seen other codes in other cities that are written that way, and some planners have interpreted that to mean if you don't mitigate, don't meet the approval criteria. But it's not every case that mitigation is needed. In fact, if planning follows the structure that it should, a lot of times the system's already planned, so you don't always need mitigation. So I think that deconstruct that just enough to avoid implementation in the future. It's a small thing, but it's been another.
That's tell me the section again.
It's 177850C.
50C.
50C, correct.
I would say you're suggesting mitigated. I'm sorry, Hollis, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I had one last question, and that was, I'm not sure if I was hearing people correctly. The piece that was in the previous code that is now 177850A, the annexation shall not have an adverse impact, blah, blah, blah. I thought I heard somebody say to take that out or strike that. That seems to be the core of what we're supposed to do as a planning commission. Why would we take that out? Or was I mishearing that?
That's where we suggest either take it out or put it up in the first intro box as kind of like a header to the bullet
Okay,
points.
let's put it in the intro box then. Let's not take it out. It seems way too important.
If we're going to keep it in the code, what does it matter whether it's in the intro box or a listed subpoint? Personally, I see their reason for pulling it out because they added other things.
Yeah, for me, Chair, it was just it's a general statement where the other statements are very specific and detailing. So if you're going to have a general statement as a bullet point, it seems almost counterproductive to those other bullets. So if you leave it as kind of the intro, this is what our high level view is to sustain livability and have less financial impact, and then these are the conditions and how you will achieve that. And that's kind of my perspective on it.
Okay, so you see it as like an umbrella statement.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
B, C, D, and E implement A. So if A is not a bullet, then it introduces the issue.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like how many times have you started off a sentence and said a whole bunch of stuff that didn't mean anything, and then you finally, as a way to get to what you were trying to say, and what you were trying to say was what important. And I just kind of look at it as whoever wrote that initially kind of had to put an introductory paragraph in, so they threw it in. But at the end of the day, if you just completely got rid of it and said they got to do B, C, and D, it's clear. It's like it doesn't add anything; it distracts.
So you're saying to take it out completely.
Yeah, I just don't think it adds anything. It just creates ammunition, because if it's there, then all of a sudden somebody's got to interpret it legally in one way. David knows this, and the next thing you know, or whatever. So if you want clear and objective criteria as possible, because remember that's what this section is. It's called annexation criteria, and normally when we have those, they pretty much do this, do this, do this. So. That's why I just think it detracts.
Yeah, I think David gave us a good description of that. We do have more latitude in this particular section of code, and I'm comfortable with leaving it.
Yeah, I think it's a nice introduction, and it kind of puts people on notice as to, this is why the criteria exists. I like the idea of keeping it as a header or intro.
That may strike the best balance between, the commissioner's different takes on it, is frankly just to leave it where it is. And then B would become, what's written now as B would become A.
Yeah.
And so on.
Okay.
All right.
The other one, Jerry, the other thing I would just say, this is just, I don't know if it's part of the motion or not, because it's not in here, but this is going to go in front of council. Council's going to, somehow notice it or whatever. I'm going to suggest and encourage the planning staff to notice everybody who is in the urban growth boundary and, who is not in the city at this point, so that they know what's going on and they can come talk to council. Think about what we're doing with the tree code thing. There was a lot of discussion there that said, oh, we need to hear from developers. We need to hear from them. We need to hear from these affected individuals. Well, those homeowners are the affected individuals. So, that's just some letters, but I just don't, several of us have said, we're not sure that the word has kind of gotten out to some of these other people that are affected. And I just like to make sure they know they can come and talk to the council. I don't want to delay it.
Okay. I echo Don. I think it's very important to let the people, especially the people who live on the boundary, to know that, because
that would be sort of a side comment to planning staff, not even the city council, because by the time they see this and review it, it's going to be too late.
Right.
So that's
Well,
a side
it will be
comment to planning staff.
Yeah, well, let's take what Ron said earlier. you know, he didn't pay too much attention until all of a sudden the Sandy style came up and whoa, he's now going to be impacted. And so, you know, he became interested and now actually part of the commission. So, you know, Kelly said, and I agree, you know, people don't know what's going on or don't take an impact and they're going to show up. They're not going to testify. But, you know, slap somebody upside the head and say, look, they're planning on doing this and this is what we think it's going to do. They might show up. But I just don't think they know that. And then if they know and don't show up, again, that's their situation.
Okay, I think that's something, it does not need to be in a motion because like I say, that's kind of the planning staff. It's in the record. I would say we just kind of leave it with planning staff. I don't know if that's an easily done task or not. Okay, that's what I kind of thought. It's easy to say from this point in a property, give me all the addresses within 1,000 feet. There's computer programs that do that. But to look at the urban growth boundary that goes like this and pick every piece of property owner and find their address and get them a notification, I see would be a challenge.
It's in their database. It's a simple GIS process. I mean, I got a hunting application that tells me that. So,
are you volunteering, Don?
It's actually not that simple because the tax lot data we get is outdated. So we can send letters to all those people, but if any new property owner changed hands in the last year, it's just going to go.
I'm more concerned about that we take the time to involve the public than let the bureaucracy get in the way. I mean, it is what it is. And if Kelly wants me to volunteer to come help get that figured out, I'll be glad to come over.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that. It's that I don't even know if we have anybody currently with GIS on their system because everybody's working from home. The other problem is I think the city council meeting is going to be in like 2.5 weeks. So unless your recommendation also includes to redo the legal notice and push it to a July meeting, which we could do, which I'm fine doing, then we could probably accomplish the notice. But we're not going to be able to do all that and notice everybody and expect people to show up in June. When's the next meeting, Emily? Is it June 15th?
Yeah, I think it's on the June 15th one right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to probably punt it to July, et cetera. But that's my concern. If everything's kind of hardwired, then you're asking us to give you input, and the input doesn't mean anything because, oh, well, it's already noticed, so we can't do anything. So, sure, it puts a crank in the works, but I mean, that's what we're here. You know, we've never been shy.
Yeah, I'm just letting you know, though, I'm not shy either, and I'm letting you know that it's not as easy as it sounds. We can't just call and say, hey, give us these properties. If it was like Gary mentioned, a point on a map, that would be simple. Title companies will do that for us for almost free. So it would take staff time and more. Basically, we would not be able to do the June 15th city council meeting. We just have to fund.
Maybe I should know this, but do we use social media to our advantage in a case like this, where we could post about it to get feedback?
I don't think that meets any kind of legal criteria of making sure somebody's noticed, because now you're saying, I'll tell you, I'm not on the Sandy Happenings group because I don't want to get ex parte contact. So, you know, proactively letting people know it's just a job.
Using
Go ahead, Dave.
Facebook or something like that in this case would be fine because there isn't, frankly, an obligation to be giving that kind of notice. So the city could certainly choose to. The city could certainly choose to send it out by mail, and if it chose to do it via, you know, whatever, Facebook or whatever else people use, then that'd be fine. Because there's not an obligation to be giving it in the first place.
Because you're just sharing the word of what you're doing. You're just being transparent. You're not trying to take a legal stance on it. You're just being transparent with what you're doing.
Right. And staff can give it their best shot, but rather than, you know, short of pushing it to another month for city council.
I mean, what I'll do is ask my supervisor, as the city manager, whether they would rather notice everybody outside of the city limits or punt And if they do want to do that, then it's going to be punted. And if they would rather move forward with it in June, then that's what will probably happen.
Yeah.
I'll let him make the
Good.
decision.
Sounds good. Sounds
Okay.
good.
Yeah, you don't have any, I mean, you don't have any annexation proposals in front of you anyway, so it's not like you're trying to get ahead of somebody or whatever. So I'm more concerned about the appearance of due process, regardless of what the law tells us.
Okay, here's what I have picked up, that we would be sending on to City Council with our recommended changes. Correct me if I'm wrong. 1778, 50A would be moved back. We would like to see it moved back into the opening paragraph.
Yes.
1778, 50C, the part on mitigation needs something that is if necessary. What was that the term you used, Todd? Was necessary? Wasn't needed, was it?
I think either would work, but yeah, some qualifier to recognize there are instances where mitigation is not required.
Okay.
If not mitigated, comma, if necessary. That's what I wrote down.
Yeah, that works.
And we would like to express something of a concern or an interest for a lower threshold for just kind of a single lot. Look, my thought on that is that we're not going to recommend that certain words, but what we're saying to City Council is this is something we see as kind of a gap here. You guys can address it, decide what you want to do on it. Am I reading that one right? Or correct?
I think so.
Okay. The only other one is the possibility of if we want to suggest a change in the number of years on the trees, because I've still heard some say, I don't know if I've heard anybody say adamantly 10 years, but we said I can go with 7, I can go with 8, I can go 5.
I thought we had consensus on 5 as long, and then we would amend it if the retention report came back and gave us some different information.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
When the state committee comes back, yeah.
Okay. All right. If there's nothing else that anybody's picked up, I think that David would allow somebody to do a so moved, and we can go from there.
Yeah, especially with this, that's really just fine because it's with this legislative, it's great.
Well, I want to do it. So moved.
I second it.
Okay. It's been moved by
Yeah.
Todd, seconded by Chris to send the annexation code revision to City Council with our suggested changes, modifications.
Yeah. Yes.
All right, moved and seconded. Do you have a question?
No, I was just going to say, it looks like Ron is not on anymore, so he won't be part of the motion.
Okay. I didn't think to tell him. He could have called in on his phone.
Yeah. I thought
Anyway,
about
go to a roll call vote.
Commissioner Carlton,
Yes.
Commissioner Wasowski is absent. Commissioner McLean-Wenzel,
yes.
Commissioner Logan,
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley,
Yes.
Commissioner Mayton,
Yes.
and Chairman Crosby.
Yes. Okay, that sends it on. Items from commission and staff. Questions that anybody has in staff? I appreciated Kelly's email to us that kind of was a reminder, it may have been a first-time reminder to some of us, of reading the department reports. If you pulled one up and read it, you may have learned a lot of things you didn't know.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
So thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, thank you.
You
Kelly.
broke up a bit there, Hollis, for me. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just said thank you, Kelly. I thought the reports are really nice too.
I don't know if the commission has anything else. I didn't really have a lot prepared for tonight. I mean, we'll have another meeting on June 30th with several items. And as a reminder, that meeting begins at 6:30 at night.
Okay.
And we also have July schedule, which I may or may not be at. And then
What day is that again, Kelly?
one in July.
No, the June. You said June 30th?
June 30th at 6:30 p.m. And then the July 27th.
Okay.
I've had a unexpected road trip come up from June 15th through June 30th, and I cannot fly because I'm going to go see a very sick relative and on the East Coast, so I'm driving. But I have to be back by July 1st, so I should be home on June 30th. But if something happens, I may be absent. I will let you know. But my plan is to be home by the 30th. So
We'll understand if you want to stand through the whole meeting. Anything else? On a personal note, buried my father today.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Oh,
99 years old.
No.
I didn't do it myself. It was done in Pennsylvania, but I got to participate by Zoom. So we'll have a family thing later on. My mom passed away back in October, and she was 99.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, we'll take a motion.
A motion
I
to
move we
adjourn?
adjourn.
Okay, we'll take one of those as the motion, and the other one was the second. So Hollis motioned and John seconded. To adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
Jerry,
you.
my